Chapter 124. The three of you can't do anything to me. I'm going to get the heaven-grade elixir today. Ji Lingtian laughed maniacally and ignored the three hall masters. A figure rushed towards Chu Fengmian. One of his hands was covered in the color of chaos, as if it contained some kind of mystical power. Get over here for me. Ji Lingtian's hand grabbed at Chu Fengmian, and Chu Fengmian felt a supreme suction force, as if his flesh and blood were going to be sucked out. Heavenly Pivot Absorption Technique? Seeing Ji Lingtian's move, Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of something. Ji Lingtian's technique was actually from Heavenly Pivot Hall, one of the 7 major sections. Chu Fengmian had a lot of dealings with the 7 major sects in his previous life, so he was naturally familiar with the techniques of Heavenly Pivot Hall. It was no wonder that Ji Lingtian's strength was so terrifying that he could contend with the 3 hall masters by himself. The technique he practiced was from Heavenly Pivot Hall. In this remote Wuxing country, a person who practiced the techniques of the 7 major sects was naturally invincible. Boy, aren't you extremely talented? Are you so arrogant that you want to break my record? Today, I'll kill you and let those people see the consequences of challenging me. Ji Lingtian's face was ferocious, and he shouted at Chu Fengmian. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and he rushed towards Chu Fengmian with a strong burst of spiritual energy. Today, he not only wanted to snatch the heaven-grade elixir from Chu Fengmian's hands, but also to kill him. Sword. Chu Fengmian's expression was calm. Even in front of Ji Lingtian, Chu Fengmian's expression was still calm. Chu Fengmian held the black azure sword tightly. Ha ha, a little guy in the body refining realm actually wants to resist? Looking at Chu Fengmian's action, Ji Lingtian laughed disdainfully. Even if you resist, you'll die. Ji Lingtian moved his hand and grabbed at Chu Fengmian. At the same time, layers of space had overlapped around him, surrounding Chu Fengmian and Ji Lingtian. In this way, it was impossible for the 3 hall masters to save him. In this layer of space, Chu Fengmian and Ji Lingtian were separated. Outsiders couldn't see what was happening inside. Perfect. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a strange smile. Since that's the case, there's no need for me to hold back. A little fellow at the body refinement realm wants to overturn the heavens? Ji Lingtian looked at Chu Fengmian and laughed. A supreme sword intent was almost at his chest. The sword, almost silently, pierced into Ji Lingtian's chest. This sword was so fast that people could not see it clearly. Peak of sword intent. Limitless sword. Chu Fengmian coldly spat out 2 sentences. A sharp sword essence had completely erupted from his body. The peak of sword intent. It was the realm that all sword cultivators in the world dreamed of, the pinnacle of swordsmanship. This level of sword will was something that many sword cultivators could not achieve, but it was displayed by Chu Fengmian today. What? Ji Lingtian's face was completely frozen. The pain of the sword piercing his chest had already spread. Bang! He waved his hand and suddenly Chu Fengmian's body was sent flying. At the same time, a blood mark was left on Ji Lingtian's chest. No, the strength of this body is still too weak. Chu Fengmian's eyes were a little hazy. This sword did not kill Ji Lingtian. Chu Fengmian had already used the peak of sword intent, but this sword did not pierce through Ji Lingtian's heart. Chu Fengmian's strength was still not enough. If Chu Fengmian's strength was a little stronger, Ji Lingtian's sword would definitely kill him. But now Chu Fengmian's sword failed. Chu Fengmian was in danger. Little bastard! How dare you hurt me? He felt the pain in his chest. Ji Lingtian roared angrily. His anger had gone to his head. He could not imagine that he, a warrior at the peak of the wind controlling realm, would be hurt by a warrior at the body refining realm. I want you to die! Ji Lingtian, this is not the place for you to behave atrociously. Get out! Ji Lingtian did not make another move. The layers of space around him had been easily broken. An old voice suddenly sounded. A white-haired old man had appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. Hearing this old voice, Chu Fengmian's heart finally calmed down. This white-haired old man was the only saint that Chu Fengmian had noticed before. Now this saint made a move. Chu Fengmian. Where did this old guy come from? How dare you go against me? Seeing the white-haired old man standing in front of Chu Fengmian, Ji Lingtian roared crazily. Once upon a time, he was hurt by a warrior at the body refining realm. This was absolutely a great humiliation for him who was conceited. Now Ji Lingtian thought that only by killing Chu Fengmian could he wash away his humiliation. This boy dares to hurt me. Today he will definitely die. No one can stop him. Ji Lingtian roared and hit Chu Fengmian with his palm again. Hearing Ji Lingtian's words, the white-haired old man's eyes showed some surprise, especially when he saw the wound on Ji Lingtian's chest. His eyes were full of disbelief. A warrior at the body refining realm could hurt Ji Lingtian, who was at the peak of the wind controlling realm? But now that this palm was coming, the old man had no time to think about it. The old man waved his hand, and suddenly Ji Lingtian's palm was easily dissolved. Even Ji Lingtian's body was forced to retreat hundreds of feet. What? The crown prince was forced to retreat. The eyes of the disciples of the Saint Hall below widened when they saw Ji Lingtian being forced to retreat. They couldn't believe that the invincible crown prince, who had single-handedly fought against 3 sect masters, would actually be pushed back 300 meters by an old man with a single wave of his hand. The strength of these two people was not above the same level. Xianbei Saint. Greetings, Xianbei Saint. Seeing the old man, the 3 hall masters hurriedly bowed their heads and greeted him respectfully. Hearing the 3 hall masters' words, the crowd realized the old man's identity. This old man was actually a saint. Xianbei Saint. Ji Lingtian's face changed rapidly. Hearing the word saint, his fighting spirit in his heart faded by half. A saint was a terrifying warrior in the divine power realm. No matter how arrogant Ji Lingtian was, he would not dare to fight against a saint. Let's go. Ji Lingtian made a prompt decision. He turned around and left directly. He could only accept this loss. With Xianbei Saint here, it was impossible for him to kill Chu Fengmian. Damn Chu Fengmian and Xianbei Saint. When I break through to the divine power realm, each of you will die. Chapter 125. Chu Fengmian's sword had already pierced through Ji Lingtian's spiritual meridian, so he needed time to recover. Stop! Go after him! When the 3 hall masters saw that Ji Lingtian was about to leave, they all wanted to chase after him. However, they were all stopped by Saint Xianbei. Let him go. Xianbei Saint said calmly. Yes. The 3 hall masters did not dare to refute Xianbei Saint's words. Xianbei Saint turned to look at Chu Fengmian and suddenly said, Junior, are you willing to be my disciple? This sentence caused the 3 hall masters who were about to say something to shut their mouth. They wanted to take Chu Fengmian as their disciple, but none of them dared to say anything when they heard Xianbei Saint's words. Even if the 3 hall masters had more guts, they would not dare to compete with Xianbei Saint for a disciple. Xianbei Saint was one of the supreme existences in Wuxing Academy. His status was not lower than the dean of Wuxing Academy. Xianbei Saint had always lived alone and did not have any disciples. They did not expect Xianbei Saint to come here to take Chu Fengmian as his disciple. Junior, are you willing? Xianbei Saint asked with a smile. I'm willing. Chu Fengmian answered hurriedly. It was better to be a disciple of a saint than to join any other hall. He came to Wuxing Academy to join one of the 3 halls. Now that he could be a disciple of Xianbei Saint, it would be beneficial for him. With Xianbei Saint's support, Chu Fengmian was not worried that Ji Lingtian would take revenge on him. Well, take this wooden token. From now on, you're my first personal disciple. Xianbei Saint said with a smile. Let's go. I'll take you to the place where you'll cultivate in the future. Xianbei Saint grabbed Chu Fengmian and lifted him up. Chu Fengmian felt that Xianbei Saint did not have any ill intentions and did not resist. He was brought into the space by Xianbei Saint. The two figures quickly disappeared from where they stood. Only countless dumbfounded people were left behind. Chu Fengmian is a disciple of Xianbei Saint? A saint. Chu Fengmian has actually become a saint's disciple. This brat is really lucky. Now that Saint Xianbei thinks highly of him, who would dare to go against Chu Fengmian in the future? Countless martial artists chatted, their voices filled with envy and jealousy. Even many elders and hall masters were extremely jealous. That was a saint, a supreme saint. Not to mention being accepted as a disciple by a saint, even if they were to become servants, it would be extremely beneficial for them to be able to receive a single instruction from a saint. The news of Chu Fengmian being taken away as a disciple by Saint Xianbei had spread throughout Wuxing Academy in just a day. Damn it! That old fellow Xianbei Saint has indeed taken a fancy to this kid. The Crown Prince, Ling Tian, had just returned to the Saint Hall when he heard the news. Every word he spoke was accompanied by the sound of him gnashing his teeth. Being injured by Chu Fengmian was definitely a humiliation in his life. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's talent had already made him feel jealous. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the risk to kill Chu Fengmian. However, he didn't expect Saint Xianbei to stop all of this. I must kill this little bastard. If I don't kill him, I, Ling Tian, am not a man. Ling Tian roared crazily. Men! Crown Prince! A few Saint Hall martial artists hurried in and knelt on the ground. Find a chance to kill Chu Fengmian. No matter how talented he is, he's just a body-refining realm martial artist. It shouldn't be difficult to kill him. Ling Tian said viciously. With his arrogant character, he had always been the #1 genius in Wuxing Academy. Now that he had met Chu Fengmian, who had surpassed him, Ling Tian's heart was filled with jealousy. He couldn't wait to kill Chu Fengmian and tear him into pieces. Crown Prince, Chu Fengmian is now Saint Xuanbei's disciple. Shouldn't we be more careful when dealing with him? If Saint Xianbei gets angry, we won't be able to stop him. A dark-skinned man said. He was young Master D, one of the core members of Saint Hall. Now that he heard Ling Tian's words, he frowned and said, Chu Fengmian was indeed nothing. However, if Saint Xianbei was behind Chu Fengmian, it would be a different story. With Saint Xuanbei's protection, even if the entire Saint Hall went up against Chu Fengmian, they might not be able to hurt him. So what if he's Saint Xianbei? I've met with the dean recently, and the dean has confirmed that I'll be the next dean. Even if we kill Chu Fengmian, Saint Xianbei won't dare to go against Saint Hall. We can only suffer in silence. Ling Tian said with a cold smile on his face. Can Saint Xianbei stay by Chu Fengmian's side forever? When Chu Fengmian is alone, we'll find a chance to kill him. If this little bastard doesn't die, he'll be a big threat. Yes. Countless Saint Hall martial artists echoed in unison. On the other side, the family Chu and the Qing family had a similar conversation. Xianbei Saint is a saint. How can he protect Chu Fengmian forever? We'll find a chance to kill Chu Fengmian when he leaves the Saint Hall. Even if we can't kill him, he won't have a good time in Wuxing Academy. So what if he's Saint Xianbei? It's not like Qing family doesn't have a saint in family Chu. Let the little guys from Green Alliance find a chance to deal with Chu Fengmian. Even if Chu Fengmian is talented, he's just a newcomer. How strong can he be? Xianbei Saint won't be able to interfere in the conflict between the disciples. The entire Wuxing Academy was shaken. Xianbei Saint brought Chu Fengmian to a courtyard at the top of the mountain. This was where Xianbei Saint's palace was located. There were only 3 auras in the huge palace, including Chu Fengmian. Only an old servant of Xianbei Saint was in charge of cleaning the place every day. Congratulations, Master, for having a great disciple. The old servant looked at Xianbei Saint with a smile on his wrinkled face. You'll be in charge of teaching him the most basic rules. Xianbei Saint glanced at the old servant and said. Then, his body flashed and he left. Only Chu Fengmian and the old servant were left in the huge courtyard. Chapter 126. How should I address you, senior? Chu Fengmian looked at the old servant and asked. The old servant looked ordinary, but Chu Fengmian could see that the old servant's spiritual energy was no less than that of the 3 hall masters. In terms of strength, he could even fight with Lingtian. Chu Fengmian dared not be arrogant in front of such a powerful person. My name is Chenzo. If you don't mind, you can call me by my name. Chenzo said with a smile. All right, I'll call you Elder Chen from now on. Chu Fengmian said respectfully. Chenzo was a servant in front of the Xianbei Saint, but he was a powerful person in front of Chu Fengmian. A powerful person deserved Chu Fengmian's respect. You're too polite, young master, Chenzo said with a smile. He looked at Chu Fengmian and could see that Chu Fengmian was not faking it. Generally, disciples from big forces were extremely arrogant. Chu Fengmian's personality left a good impression on him. Young master, Master is currently busy dealing with some matters in the academy. Therefore, this old servant will replace Master and teach young Master some things. Chenzo looked at Chu Fengmian and said slowly. Even though young Master has already come under Master's command, Master's teaching style is different from that of ordinary elders and hall masters. Master will not restrict or interfere with young Master's actions. He will only provide sufficient resources for young Master's cultivation. Young Master, you've just entered the academy, so there are some rules that you may not know. All inner disciples are required to complete a task after entering the academy. Task? Chu Fengmian was puzzled. There were indeed missions in Wuxing Academy. However, generally speaking, only the outer disciples would be assigned missions. The inner disciples did not seem to have such a rule. That's right, Chenzo said with a smile. This mission is actually just a small test. It's to prevent the sect elders from saying that the inner disciples are idlers. All inner disciples are required to complete a task when they enter the academy, then they are not required to take any more tasks. As long as they contribute to the academy, those stubborn elders will be too embarrassed to gossip. I see. Chu Fengmian nodded. He also understood the meaning behind Chen Zhou's words. Inner sect disciples, although it was said that this was to allow them to cultivate wholeheartedly, so they would not be given any tasks, after all, inner sect disciples still relied on the academy's resources. If they did not contribute at all to the academy, there would still be some stubborn old fellows who would gossip at the side. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, there was an unspoken rule. When an inner disciple entered the sect, they had to accept and complete a mission. As long as he contributed to the sect, those old fogies wouldn't say anything. Master has always disdained to pay attention to such matters, but for the sake of young Master's peace, it's best to accept a mission and complete it. This old servant has already selected a mission and will now hand it over to young Master. Chenzo took out a jade slip and handed it to Chu Fengmian. Although this person is a little dangerous for the young lord, it's enough. This mission was actually chosen by Master as well. It can be considered a test for young Master. When young Master is done with this character, Master should return. Chenzo glanced at Chu Fengmian and said, This mission has a time limit of 1 month. After a month, if young Master does not return, Master will expel young Master from the sect. Young Master, please bear this in mind. Thank you for the reminder, Elder Chen. Chu Fengmian nodded respectfully. This reminder should be added by Chenzo himself. With Xianbei Saint's character, he should not take the initiative to remind Chu Fengmian. However, as long as the character was not too difficult, Chu Fengmian was confident that he could easily solve it within a month. Chu Fengmian took the jade slip and opened it. There was only a faint sentence in it. Sand bandits are rampant in the northwest desert. Chu Fengmian wants to help the Sand King to eliminate all the sand bandits in one fell swoop. Eliminate the sand bandits? Chu Fengmian frowned when he saw this mission. Sand bandits were everywhere in the northwest desert. These sand bandits lived in the desert and often came out to plunder the surrounding cities, then fled back to the desert. Originally, it was just a group of sand bandits. Some experts in victorious Wu country chose to suppress and kill them. However, after a long time, the sand bandits were not killed. In fact, their numbers were increasing. They had expanded to 10,000 people and established a new country on their own, becoming a country within a country. The experts in victorious Wu country had no choice but to report this matter to victorious Wu Academy, asking them to send people to deal with the sand bandit. In the vast desert, ordinary warriors could not do anything to the sand bandit. Master's test for me is really not simple. Chu Fengmian looked at the reward written on the jade slip and muttered to himself. The reward for eliminating the sand bandits was a total of 2,000 contribution points. Generally, the victorious Wu Academy's missions were only worth 100 to 200 contribution points. The more difficult missions were only worth 1,000 contribution points. This mission actually had a reward of 2,000 contribution points. One could imagine how difficult it was. However, each and every one of these sand bandits was extremely fierce. Chu Fengmian killing them was a good deed to punish evil and promote good. Then, I will leave now, Chu Fengmian said. The sooner this mission was completed, the better. Chu Fengmian did not want to delay any longer. By the way, Old Chen, where can I exchange these contribution points for items? Chu Fengmian suddenly stopped and asked Old Chen. He had obtained a considerable amount of contribution points from the assessment. Now that Chu Fengmian wanted to complete the mission, he could use these contribution points to exchange for some useful items. The mission was personally selected by Saint Xian Bei, so the difficulty would not be low. Chu Fengmian had to be fully prepared. Exchange contribution points? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Chen Zhou was stunned for a moment before he smiled. This old man forgot that young master still has quite a lot of contribution points. These contribution points can be exchanged in the contribution hall at the upper level. All right. Chu Fengmian nodded. He took a big step and left without the slightest hesitation. This kid is not bad. Looking at Chu Fengmian's back, Chen Zhou's eyes revealed a hint of deep meaning. But I don't know if this kid can complete this mission. Master's test might be too difficult. This mission is not as simple as it seems. After Chen Zhou muttered to himself, he continued to clean the courtyard. Contribution Hall. Chapter 127. The Contribution Hall was the most important place in Wuxing Academy. The prosperity of Wuxing Academy was inseparable from the contribution point. The treasures that were contributed from countless regions in Wuxing Nation would be placed in the Contribution Hall. The disciples of Wuxing Academy could use their contribution points to exchange for some of the items. There were two ways to obtain contribution points. The first way was to complete missions to obtain contribution points. Completing missions would bring great benefits to the Academy, and the contribution points were considered as rewards. The other way was to sell valuable items to the Contribution Hall. Not only could the Contribution Hall exchange for treasures, but it could also exchange items for contribution points. Of course, the price charged would be much lower than the exchange price. However, there was no third way to obtain contribution points in Wuxing Academy. Hence, in order to accumulate contribution points, many disciples would sell their items to the Contribution Hall. The Contribution Hall could also profit from the difference in price. Now, Chu Fengmian had the 10,000 contribution points that he had obtained from the previous ARC assessment, as well as the 13,000 contribution points that he had obtained from exchanging monster cores for the second assessment. A total of 23,000 contribution points. This was a considerable amount of wealth. This wealth was equivalent to the wealth of 2 Lin mansions. In some remote places, it was enough to make one a wealthy person. Stop right there. Just as Chu Fengmian entered the Contribution Hall, A thunderous roar sounded from the side. He turned his head around and saw a few strong men walking over from the side. These people were all dressed in red, which represented their status. They were members of the enforcement team. In Wuxing Academy, the enforcement team was one of the major powers. The enforcement team was usually patrolling the academy to maintain the academy's rules. Most of the enforcement team members were the elders of the outer sect. Their aptitude was not enough to be promoted to the inner sect, but their strength was not bad. Even though joining the enforcement team would waste some of their cultivation time, they could still benefit from it. What's the matter? Chu Fengmian looked at the group of enforcement team members and asked calmly. These enforcement team members were around the peak of the body refining realm. In Chu Fengmian's opinion, they would be easy to deal with. However, the enforcement team members had the right to supervise the other disciples. Chu Fengmian did not want to get into a conflict with them. Nothing. It's just that you seem a little unfamiliar. A disciple of the law enforcement team sized up Chu Fengmian with a greedy look in his eyes. Our disciplinary squad patrols the academy every day, and it's extremely tiring for us. As a freshman, shouldn't you contribute some money to the academy? Chu Fengmian guessed their intentions upon seeing the arrival of the law enforcement team. These disciples of the law enforcement team would often use their law enforcement authority to demand wealth from other disciples. This was especially true for ordinary newcomers. After all, newcomers had just entered the academy and were unwilling to have conflicts with others. Thus, they usually settled things with money. It seemed that this group of law enforcement disciples could see that Chu Fengmian looked unfamiliar, so they wanted to ask for some benefits from him. This is a gift. Thank you for your hard work. Chu Fengmian was too lazy to argue with this group of people. He casually took out a bottle of energy-gathering pills from his storage bag and tossed it at the leader of the enforcement team. This amount of wealth was nothing to Chu Fengmian, and he was too lazy to bother. Seeing how straightforward Chu Fengmian was, the greed in that disciple's eyes grew even more. He held the bottle of energy-gathering pills in his hand and smiled. Junior brother is indeed forthright. However, we have more than 10 brothers here. We can't split this bottle of pills. How about this? Junior brother, take out some more pills and give each of us a bottle. Consider it your contribution to the academy. What? Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold when he saw that the disciples of the enforcement team were still unwilling to give up. He had no intention of tangling with this group of law enforcement disciples, but since they wanted to deliberately make things difficult for him, he wouldn't hesitate. Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid of this group of law enforcement disciples. A man who was never content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. It seemed that this group of people thought that Chu Fengmian was a pushover. Scram! Chu Fengmian furrowed his brows and roared angrily. He could also see that the disciples of the enforcement team were insatiably greedy, and he wasn't in the mood to tangle with them. Kid, what did you say? The disciple of the enforcement team said with a hint of anger in his eyes. How dare you go against us, the disciples of the enforcement team? It seems like you still don't know how powerful we are. Come, a few of you go and teach this kid a lesson. Take his storage pouch. Since he's unwilling to hand it over, then we'll take it ourselves. A newcomer who just established himself in the academy dares to be so arrogant. It seems like we have to teach him a lesson. Senior brother Feng Qi, let me do it. It's been a long time since I've taught a newcomer who doesn't know his place a lesson. An eagle-beaked martial artist walked out from the crowd and sneered as he sized up Chu Fengmian. Kid, don't think that you're some kind of prodigy outside. Once you're in the Martial Victory Academy, even if you're a dragon, you'll still be coiled up here. As the eagle-beaked martial artist spoke, he suddenly threw a punch at Chu Fengmian. As soon as this punch struck out, it instantly swept out a gust of fierce wind that was sufficient to break a towering tree. If an ordinary martial artist at the 7th level of the body refinement stage were to encounter this punch would probably be able to break a few ribs. Courting death? Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. He also clenched his fist and threw a punch at the eagle-beaked martial artist. You're just a bunch of dogs raised by the academy. Do you really think you're the master of this academy? Bang! The two fists collided. The eagle-beaked martial artist's arm was twisted into a strange shape. One of his arms had already been broken by Chu Fengmian's punch. This was the result of Chu Fengmian holding back. Otherwise, Chu Fengmian's punch could have killed the eagle-beaked martial artist. What? A newcomer actually has such terrifying strength. Seeing that the eagle-beaked martial artist's arm was broken with a punch, the other disciples of the enforcement team were also shocked. Kid, regardless of your strength, you still dare to injure a disciple of the enforcement team. You actually dared to injure our law enforcement team's disciples. It seems like you really don't put our law enforcement team in your eyes. The leading disciple of the enforcement team said coldly. Kneel down, hand over your storage pouch, and apologize to us. Then, this matter will be over. Chapter 128. Offend the law enforcement team? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with disdain. In my opinion, the law enforcement team is nothing but a bunch of dogs raised by the school. I gave you a few bones and you want more? Extorting disciples every day. You law enforcement team should have been kicked out of the school long ago. Chu Fengmian sneered at the law enforcement team. He was not afraid at all. Even the Saint Hall, the most powerful force in the Academy of Wuxing, hated Chu Fengmian to the bone. How could Chu Fengmian be afraid of offending a law enforcement team? Besides, Chu Fengmian could defeat warriors in the Divine Sea Realm. These law enforcement team disciples were just outer disciples in the body refining realm. In Chu Fengmian's opinion, they could be crushed to death at any time. If they were not in the Academy of Wuxing, those law enforcement team disciples would have been dead by now. Someone dares to have a conflict with the law enforcement team? He is a newcomer. I didn't expect there to be someone so arrogant among the newcomers this year. This guy is courting death. He dares to provoke the law enforcement team. They were outside the contribution hall. The contribution hall was always crowded. The conflict between Chu Fengmian and the law enforcement team attracted the attention of many disciples of the Academy of Wuxing. The law enforcement team had always been avoided by many disciples in the Academy of Wuxing. These law enforcement team disciples had always bullied the weak and feared the strong. They would not offend the real powerful inner disciples. They only extorted the newcomers, outer disciples, and janitor disciples. Therefore, the real powerful inner disciples did not bother to pay attention to the law enforcement team. That was why the law enforcement team had survived until now. Unfortunately, the person they met today was Chu Fengmian. If it were someone else, they would have been extorted by the law enforcement team. What? How dare you insult the law enforcement team? The law enforcement team represents the rules of the Academy of Wuxing. You are provoking the Academy of Wuxing. The leader of the law enforcement team said furiously. Let's go together and teach this guy a lesson. Take him to the torture chamber. Break his bones and let him know the consequences of going against the law enforcement team. More than a dozen law enforcement team disciples attacked at the same time. One after another, martial arts techniques were launched at Chu Fengmian. These law enforcement team disciples were all veterans of the Academy of Wuxing. They were even stronger than some new inner disciples. The law enforcement team disciples. Even a Divine Sea Realm warrior wouldn't be able to deal with more than a dozen law enforcement team disciples. Take me to the torture chamber? Break my bones? Good. Of you. Chu Fengmian's eyes. Of the law enforcement team. With the law enforcement team. With the law enforcement team with the law. With the law enforcement team. Calm of the law enforcement team with the law with the law with the law enforcement team. With the law enforcement team. of the... Chu Fengmian looked at the law enforcement disciples who were rushing at the front. He grabbed them with his big hand, and a surge of spiritual power was activated. Those law enforcement disciples were all caught in Chu Fengmian's hand. The force of this smash was comparable to the force of falling from a height of 100 meters, especially when their spiritual powers were all bound by Chu Fengmian. Even a martial artist in the 9th level of the body, refining realm, would have their bones broken if they couldn't use their spiritual energy. You are so vicious. The law enforcement team disciple looked at the law enforcement team disciples who were taken away. His eyes were filled with fear. He shivered. Chu Fengmian's smash was enough to break all their bones and tendons. They really couldn't stand up anymore. They couldn't even get up, let alone stand. Vicious? If I didn't have the strength, I would be taken to the torture chamber. That would be worse. I'm being merciful, Chu Fengmian said coldly. And you? Didn't you want me to kneel down and apologize? Very well then, kneel before me. Chu Fengmian waved his hand. His spiritual energy turned into a strong pressure. It pressed down on the law enforcement team disciple. What? You want me to kneel? Impossible. The law enforcement team disciple felt Chu Fengmian's pressure. He hurriedly used his spiritual energy to resist. But his spiritual energy couldn't compete with Chu Fengmian's. Kneel! Bang! He couldn't resist the strong spiritual energy. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. You guys kneel too. Chu Fengmian looked at the law enforcement team disciples who were trying to run away. He threw a palm at them. Suddenly, the law enforcement team disciples knelt on the ground. In front of Chu Fengmian, a row of law enforcement team disciples knelt. Anyone who saw this scene would be incomparably shocked. The onlookers were also dumbfounded. The lawless enforcers had actually been subdued by a newcomer who had just entered the Martial Victory Academy. They couldn't help but talk about it. This newcomer is so scary. He defeated so many law enforcement team disciples by himself and made them kneel in front of him. He has reached the Divine Sea Realm. Since when can a newcomer have the strength of the Divine Sea Realm? It is said that there is a terrifying genius among this batch of newcomers. His name is Chu Fengmian. He broke the Crown Prince's record. Could it be him? Impossible. Someone can break the Crown Prince's record? That's what the rumors say. But even if it's not true, this guy's strength is terrifying. That move just now is enough to compete with the top 10 experts in the inner sect. Not necessarily. The top 10 inner sect martial artists all have their own trump card. Their strength is much more terrifying than what they show. But this guy is at least one of the top 20 inner sect martial artists. Chu Fengmian could hear all the discussions going on around him. That move just now isn't in the top 10 of the inner sect of the Academy of Wuxing? Chu Fengmian was surprised. Although he didn't use his full strength, he used 30% of his strength. It seemed that the Academy of Wuxing was not as weak as Chu Fengmian thought. Chapter 129. Brat, we admit defeat this time. The leading disciple looked up at Chu Fengmian with a face full of humiliation. It was a great humiliation to be forced to kneel on the ground by Chu Fengmian in front of so many people. The law enforcement team had always been the ones to force others to do things. They had never been forced to such an extent. Damn it! When I go back, I must find someone to kill this brat. Show him who's boss. He thought viciously in his heart, but his expression remained unchanged. He put on a fawning expression. You've beaten us. It's time to let us go. I know you still want to take revenge on me. But let me tell you, don't provoke me. You can't afford to provoke me. Chu Fengmian said with a cold smile. He didn't hide the killing intent in his eyes. This group of law enforcement team disciples was just a group of flies. However, a group of flies could also make people extremely irritated. Yes, Senior is right. The leading disciple of the law enforcement team answered repeatedly. What he was thinking now was how to leave this place as soon as possible. After all, there were more and more people watching. It was too embarrassing for them to kneel here. Want to leave? Chu Fengmian said slowly. Hand over your storage bag and identity card, and you can get lost. What? You want us to hand over our identity card and storage bag? The faces of the law enforcement team disciples changed instantly when they heard this. Impossible. Don't even think about it. The identity card and storage bag were the wealth they had accumulated over countless years. How could they hand it over so easily? The leading disciple of the law enforcement team even threatened. Brat, our law enforcement team has some connections with some inner disciples and elders of the academy. Do you really want to shed all pretense of cordiality with our law enforcement team? Are you going to hand it over or not? Chu Fengmian's face was calm as usual. It was as if he didn't hear the words of the law enforcement team disciples at all. Our law enforcement team can do whatever we want in Wuxing Academy. Our foundation is so deep that you can't imagine it. It's better for everyone to take a step back. The leading disciple of the law enforcement team was still threatening. However, Chu Fengmian's expression remained unchanged. A threat? Chu Fengmian was never afraid of threats. Such threats were only the means of the weak. Since you don't want to hand it over, I'll take it myself. A terrifying pressure suddenly burst out from Chu Fengmian's body. This pressure pressed down on the kneeling law enforcement team disciples on the ground. Chu Fengmian possessed the bloodline of the ancient battle dragon. Hence, his aura could be considered as dragon might. Under the pressure, the faces of the law enforcement team's disciples turned red, as though they were under great pressure. Before one of the enforcers could finish his sentence, he spat out a mouthful of blood. This pressure caused him to be unable to withstand it all of a sudden. Me too. The law enforcers who were kneeling on the ground coughed up mouthfuls of blood. Unable to hold on any longer, they blurted it out. Only then did Chu Fengmian retract his pressure and look over at the law enforcers as they produced their identity medallions and bags of holding. How terrifying! He actually made these law enforcement team disciples vomit blood with just his pressure. Even some of the academy's elders might not be able to do that. Wuxing Academy actually has such a monstrous genius. If it was just strength, the top 20 inner disciples of Wuxing Academy could easily subdue these law enforcement team disciples. However, to force them to vomit blood with just his pressure, even some of the hall masters and elders couldn't do that. Looking at Chu Fengmian, the surrounding disciples were all shocked. Their eyes were filled with fear. No one dared to offend Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's move this time was enough to intimidate most people. Indeed, only strength can prevent one from being bullied. Chu Fengmian thought to himself as he looked at the crowd's eyes. In his previous life, he didn't have strength. He could only watch helplessly as his master and senior brothers and sisters were besieged by the 7 great sections. In the end, Chu Fengmian didn't even have the strength to resist before the 7 great sects experts. He could only commit suicide. In this life, he wouldn't make the same mistake again. He needed strength to achieve everything he wanted. Bring them all over. The law enforcement disciples had already raised their storage pouches and identity badges. Chu Fengmian made a grabbing motion, and all of them fell into his hand. Chu Fengmian took out his identity card and injected a stream of spiritual energy into it. The contribution points in the identity cards of the law enforcement team disciples were all transferred to Chu Fengmian's identity card. Wuxing Academy's identity cards could be exchanged for contribution points. This was also to facilitate transactions between students and disciples. After transferring all the contribution points, Chu Fengmian's identity card had 55,000 contribution points. These law enforcement team disciples were all extremely wealthy. They had obtained their contribution points by extorting other disciples. Now that Chu Fengmian had taken them away, it could only be considered as karma. As for the storage bags, Chu Fengmian took away all the energy-amassing pills in them. As for the other items, Chu Fengmian didn't care for them and threw them back. Take your people and scram. Don't ever appear in front of me again. Chu Fengmian glanced at the law enforcement team disciples and snorted coldly. Only then did he release the pressure on them. The law enforcement team disciples got up and didn't dare to look at Chu Fengmian anymore. They just lifted the law enforcement team disciples under the wall and left with fear in their eyes. If you want revenge, feel free to come. My name is Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. Chu Fengmian, it's really him. He's the only one with such strength among this year's newcomers. This kid is really arrogant to the extreme. Not only did he offend the crown prince, the Qing family, and family Chu, he even offended the law enforcement team. Everyone wasn't surprised when they heard Chu Fengmian's name. Among this batch of newcomers, Chu Fengmian was the only one who could do this. Many people had already guessed Chu Fengmian's identity when he called him Chu Fengmian. The law enforcement team has kicked an iron plate this time. However, the law enforcement team isn't that easy to bully. I'm afraid those inner disciples and academy elders that they usually support will also make a move. Chapter 130. I want to exchange all my contribution points for energy-gathering pills. Chu Fengmian entered the contribution hall. Without further ado, he took out his identity token and said, "Exchange all of them for energy-gathering pills?" The disciples in the contribution hall were stunned when they heard Chu Fengmian's request. Especially when they saw the number on Chu Fengmian's identity token, they were all shocked. There were 55,000 contribution points on Chu Fengmian's identity token. It was their first time encountering someone who wanted to exchange such a huge amount of contribution points for energy-gathering pills. Normally, the disciples of the Martial Victory Academy would rarely exchange their contribution points for energy-gathering pills. They would usually exchange them for some recovery pills or spiritual weapons to increase the success rate and safety of their missions. Who would be like Chu Fengmian, who wanted nothing but energy-gathering pills? "Senior, don't you want to exchange for something else? Our contribution hall also has many spiritual tools, healing pills and so on." The disciple couldn't help but ask. "No need. I just want to exchange them all for energy-gathering pills," Chu Fengmian said calmly. Spiritual weapons and recovery pills were extremely important to martial artists. However, Chu Fengmian didn't need them. Chu Fengmian already had enough spiritual weapons with the Black Azure Sword. He couldn't afford any spiritual weapons of a higher grade with his current wealth. Moreover, Chu Fengmian still had the rich lush monument. Chu Fengmian couldn't control this spiritual weapon yet. If Chu Fengmian needed more powerful spiritual weapons, he might as well study the rich lush monument. As for recovery pills, Chu Fengmian didn't need them at all. Now that Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the ancient battle dragon, his recovery speed was almost on par with the ancient battle dragon. As long as he didn't die, he could recover completely in a day no matter how serious his injuries were. Therefore, what Chu Fengmian needed the most was energy-gathering pills. Only with more energy-gathering pills could he replenish the spiritual energy required by the ancient battle dragon's shadow in his body. The more ancient battle dragon's blood essence he condensed, the more powerful Chu Fengmian would be. Strength was the foundation of everything. Yes. Seeing Chu Fengmian's determination, the disciple couldn't help but shake his head. This time, he had encountered a strange person. It picked up Chu Fengmian's identity card and swiped it at a formation beside it. The number on Chu Fengmian's identity card turned to 0. At the same time, countless jade bottles appeared above the magic array. Teleportation formation. Looks like it's connected to the treasure vault of the Martial Victory Academy. Chu Fengmian thought as he watched this scene. If he could enter the Martial Victory Academy's treasury and devour all the pills, Chu Fengmian's strength would definitely skyrocket. However, this was just a thought for Chu Fengmian. There were many experts in the Martial Victory Academy. At the very least, there was a Saint Xianbei. Chu Fengmian did not believe that there were no other saints in the Martial Victory Academy. Chu Fengmian still had the power to contend with a warrior at the peak of the Imperial Wind Realm. Just like Zhi Lingtian, Chu Fengmian could also injure him. However, there was nothing Chu Fengmian could do when a saint came. The power of a saint was not something Chu Fengmian could contend against. Therefore, Chu Fengmian could only think about it. Senior, these are your pills. There are a total of 55,000 chi-amassing pills. It was the first time the disciple of the worship hall had seen so many chi-amassing pills. He was a little surprised. All right. Chu Fengmian did not say anything unnecessary. With a wave of his hand, the countless jade bottles were kept into his storage bag. By the way, does the contribution hall accept monster cores? Chu Fengmian turned around and suddenly thought of something. He turned back and asked, Monster cores? Of course. Senior, are you selling monster cores? The disciple of the contribution hall said with a smile. The contribution hall had always accepted everything. As long as it was something valuable, it could be exchanged for contribution points. All right. Chu Fengmian nodded and threw a storage bag to the disciple of the disciplinary hall. Calculate the contribution points for the monster cores in it. Yes. The disciple of the contribution hall took the storage bag. After a few minutes, he determined the value of the monster cores and answered. It's worth 30,000 contribution points. 30,000 contribution points. This price is about 20% lower than the price outside. Chu Fengmian thought when he heard the price. This batch of monster cores was actually obtained by Chu Fengmian from the demonic beasts he killed on the deserted island and from the disciples of the Green Alliance. During the second assessment, Chu Fengmian only handed over half of the monster cores. The other half was brought out by Chu Fengmian. He was ready to buy it at a good price. The price of exchanging contribution points in the contribution hall was indeed 20% lower than the price outside. However, it was still much higher than the price of the demonic beast assessment. Exchange them all for contribution points, Chu Fengmian said. Chu Fengmian was too lazy to sell them outside. He might as well sell them all to the contribution hall. Now that Chu Fengmian was leaving the academy to carry out a mission, he had to be prepared to buy more elixirs. As for the remaining contribution points, exchange them all for, Senior brother, do you still need chi-amassing pills? Before Chu Fengmian finished his words, a skinny disciple beside him suddenly asked. This skinny disciple had a shrewd face. He did not look like a martial artist, but more like a businessman. Senior brother, can we have a chat outside the hall? The skinny disciple glanced at the disciples of the worship hall and whispered. Sure. Chu Fengmian glanced at the skinny disciple and guessed what he wanted. He nodded. Chu Fengmian took the identity token and followed him out of the worship hall. They came to a remote corner. My name is Tang Billion, an outer disciple of the Wuxing Academy. Senior brother, you must be this year's newcomer king, Chu Fengmian. Tang Billion took the initiative to speak to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was not surprised to be called out. He had caused such a big commotion outside the contribution hall. Tang Billion must have seen it from the side. Naturally, he knew Chu Fengmian's identity. Senior brother, if you need chi-amassing pills, why don't you exchange them with me? Tang Billion looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. The price is definitely much higher than the contribution hall. After all, it's not worth exchanging chi-amassing pills here. What's the price? Chu Fengmian saw through Tang Billion's identity when he spoke just now. Although the Wuxing Academy claimed that disciples were not allowed to do business here, no one actually cared about it. Chapter 131. One contribution point could only be exchanged for one chi-gathering pill in the contribution hall, but it could be exchanged for several chi-gathering pills in the outside world. After all, there were many people who didn't belong to Wuxing Academy who needed to buy things in the contribution hall. Tang 10 billion should be one of them. 1 contribution point in exchange for 2 qi-gathering pills. Tang Billions looked at Chu Fengmian and said, "What do you think, senior brother?" 3. 1 contribution point in exchange for 3 qi-gathering pills. Chu Fengmian glanced at Tang Billions and said calmly, "This price should be profitable for you, right?" Chu Fengmian knew that 1 contribution point in Wuxing Academy could be exchanged for 4 or 5 qi-gathering pills in the outside world, but it required special connections. Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered to deal with such transactions, but since Tang Billions had come out, Chu Fengmian certainly had to offer a good price. 3. Senior brother, this price is a bit high. Tang 10 Billion's thin face showed a bit of embarrassment. We're taking risk. This price is really unacceptable. How about this? If senior brother is willing to exchange all 30,000 contribution points, I can give you an additional 10,000 qi-gathering pills for a total of 70,000 qi-gathering pills. What do you think? Tang Billions rolled his eyes and said. His expression was indescribably distressed, as if he had been struggling for a long time. 3. This price won't change, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Although Tang Billions looked distressed, Chu Fengmian knew that he had 2 lives. However, Chu Fengmian had lived 2 lives, so he naturally knew that since Tang 10 Billion dared to offer 2, he would at least get double the profit. 3 qi-gathering pills was Chu Fengmian's bottom line. If you agree to this price, I'll come to you when I need more qi-gathering pills in the future. Seeing Tang Billion's hesitation, Chu Fengmian suddenly said. When he heard this, Tang 10 Billion, who had been distressed, suddenly relaxed. Are you serious? Of course, Chu Fengmian said calmly. If he kept exchanging for qi-gathering pills in the consecration hall, it would be too much of a loss. Therefore, if he found someone like Tang 10 Billion to do the exchange, he would be able to get more qi-gathering pills. For Chu Fengmian, he only needed an endless supply of qi-gathering pills. He didn't care about other things. It didn't matter who the contribution points were given to, whether it was to the consecration hall or Tang 10 Billion. All right, as long as senior apprentice brother comes to exchange in the future, I'll sell it to senior apprentice brother for 3 pills. Tang Billions said firmly. If it was a deal, the price of 3 qi-gathering pills was indeed not worth it, but if he could use this opportunity to win over Chu Fengmian, it was extremely worth it for Tang Billions. An inner sect disciple like Chu Fengmian, especially this year's newcomer king, would need many medicinal pills. As long as he was in this business for a long time, he wouldn't have to worry about making a profit. Here are 90,000 qi-amassing pills. Senior brother, please take a look. Tang Billions took out a storage pouch and handed it to Chu Fengmian. Neatly arranged qi-amassing pills could be seen in the middle. All right. Chu Fengmian glanced at it, before keeping the storage bag. At the same time, he transferred the 30,000 contribution points from his identity card. Senior brother, aren't you worried? Tang Billions asked in surprise when he saw Chu Fengmian accept the qi-gathering pills so decisively. When he was doing business with some disciples, they were extremely careful, afraid that he would cheat them. It was rare to see someone like Chu Fengmian who didn't even look at the pills. What's there to worry about? If you dare to cheat, you don't need to stay in the academy anymore. Chu Fengmian sneered. No one dared to cheat Chu Fengmian. Senior apprentice brother, you're really straightforward. Tang Billions pretended not to hear Chu Fengmian's threatening word. He took out a jade talisman and handed it to Chu Fengmian. This is a voice transmission jade talisman. Senior apprentice brother, if you need anything, you can come to me. By the way, I forgot to mention that I'm also a member of treasure gathering firm. Senior apprentice brother, if you need anything to sell, you can also come to me. Treasure gathering firm. Chu Fengmian muttered in his heart. Treasure gathering firm was the largest firm in Wuxing Nation. He didn't expect it to extend its business to Wuxing Academy. But it was also good. If Chu Fengmian needed anything, he could come to Tang Billions directly. Chu Fengmian took the voice transmission jade talisman and turned to leave. This time, He had exchanged a total of 145,000 energy-gathering pills, which was enough for Chu Fengmian's cultivation for the time being. Chu Fengmian now needed close to 5,000 energy-gathering pills for his daily cultivation. These 145,000 energy-gathering pills were actually enough for Chu Fengmian to cultivate normally for a month. Fortunately, it was enough for Chu Fengmian to consume until the completion of the mission. It's not easy to raise a big eater. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh in his heart. If it wasn't him who could obtain so many energy-gathering pills, it would be impossible for others to satisfy the appetite of the ancient battle dragon. However, when there were enough energy-gathering pills, the true strength of the battle dragon's skill would be revealed. As long as there were enough energy-gathering pills, there would be no bottlenecks for a breakthrough. When Chu Fengmian awakened a few more drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence, he would have enough capital to fight against Ling Tian. I should go and complete the mission given by Master first. I wonder how it will turn out. Chu Fengmian made up his mind. Without thinking about anything else, he left Wuxing Academy. In Wuxing Academy, there were arcs heading towards the extreme capital every day. He waited at the pier for a while before taking the arcs and returning to the extreme capital. When he returned to the tea house, he rode on the black-scaled horse King and galloped towards the northwest desert. The black-scaled horse King galloped for 3 days before Chu Fengmian arrived at a military camp at the edge of the northwest desert. This military camp was the Flat Sand King's military camp mentioned in the mission. Chu Fengmian came here to help the Flat Sand King eliminate the Sand Bandit. There were more than 10,000 Sand Bandits in the northwest desert. Chu Fengmian couldn't kill them all by himself. Hence, the main task of this mission was to eliminate the Sand Bandits from the Flat Sand King's army. Chu Fengmian was only responsible for dealing with a few experts among the Sand Bandit. It was impossible for Chu Fengmian to kill every single Sand Bandit. Who is it? Stop. Trespassing into the military camp is a crime punishable by death. When Chu Fengmian arrived at the entrance of the military camp, a few armored soldiers walked out. Chapter 132. I'm a disciple of the Martial Victory Academy. I'm here to help the Pingsha King eliminate the Sand Bandit. Chu Fengmian said calmly. A disciple of the Martial Victory Academy? The soldiers were shocked as they sized up Chu Fengmian. One of them said cautiously, Do you have proof? Chu Fengmian didn't waste time and threw his identity badge over. The soldiers took the identity medallion and infused it with spiritual power. Then, the 2 words inner sect were reflected. So it's an inner disciple of the Martial Victory Academy. Please come in. The soldiers hurriedly said respectfully and opened up a path for him. You're not allowed to ride a horse in the military camp. We'll take care of the black-scaled horse kings. One of the soldiers said. All right. Chu Fengmian dismounted from his horse and walked to the barracks with a few soldiers. There were about 10,000 people in the military camp. Most of them were at the 7th level of the bone-tempering realm and above. Some of them were even close to the body-tempering realm. Chu Fengmian knew that the soldiers of the Martial Victory Academy were mostly cultivators with low aptitude. They were limited by their aptitudes and couldn't improve their strength. Even if they joined the army, they could still receive military pay. Of course, the Pingsha King didn't lack experts by his side. He could use his resources to attract experts to his side. My lord, the disciples of the Martial Victory Academy have arrived. A soldier spoke to the largest tent. Not long after, several figures walked out of the tent. The one walking at the front was a man of noble status. He was the Pingsha King, the current king of the Martial Victory Academy. He was sent to the northwest desert to suppress the surrounding areas. That was why he was called the Pingsha King. However, judging from his current expression, it wasn't an easy task. The number of sand bandits in the northwest desert didn't decrease. Instead, they recruited more people. Now, the Pingsha King was in a terrible fix. He could only seek help from the Martial Victory Academy. Young master, you must be a disciple of the Martial Victory Academy. The Pingsha king looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. In that case, the day of the Sand Bandits' destruction is just around the corner. Young master, please come in for a chat. The Pingsha king said, and entered the tent with Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian sat down in a nearby seat. In this tent, besides the Pingsha king, there were 6 or 7 middle-aged men. These middle-aged men were not weak. They were at least at the peak of the body-refining realm. The strongest among them was at the 2nd level of the Divine Sea realm. In the victorious Wushuang country, he could be considered a slightly famous powerhouse. Seeing Chu Fengmian walk in, the middle-aged men sized up Chu Fengmian a few times. Especially when they saw Chu Fengmian's realm, they couldn't help but frown. May I know what young master's realm is? A middle-aged man beside him suddenly asked when he saw Chu Fengmian sit down. 7th level of the body refinement stage. Chu Fengmian didn't try to hide anything. With the strength of these middle-aged men, it shouldn't be difficult for them to see through Chu Fengmian's realm. Naturally, he didn't need to hide it. 7th level of the body refinement stage. We reported this matter to Wu Sheng Academy, and they actually sent a little fellow like this? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, one of the middle-aged men said angrily. 7th level of the body refinement realm. What's the point of having such a brat here? Another middle-aged man couldn't help but ask. Oh? What does eradicating the Sand Bandits have to do with one's realm? Seeing the anger of the middle-aged men, Chu Fengmian sneered. Just eradicating the Sand Bandits is enough. That's easy for you to say. With your 7th level of the body refinement stage cultivation, aren't you courting death by eradicating the Sand Bandits? The middle-aged man snorted coldly and said, I think you should go back as soon as possible. Let others handle this matter. Young master, these are the experts under my command. Although their words are a little harsh, there's nothing wrong with it. The Pingsha king chimed in from the side. Young master, there is something you don't know. Although these Sand Bandits are a motley crew, some of their leaders are disciples of the 4 major sections. The most powerful leader has even reached the 3rd level of the Spirit Sea realm. The experts under my command are no match for the leader of the Sand Bandits. With young master's realm, it's better for you to return to the academy and pass this task to someone else. The Flat Sand King spoke. Chu Fengmian understood what he meant. Chu Fengmian's realm was lower than the middle-aged men present. These middle-aged men were no match for the leader of the Sand Bandits. Chu Fengmian would only be courting death if he went. It seemed that the Flat Sand King had also seen through Chu Fengmian's realm and despised him for being too low. Since that was the case, it seemed that he had to show some strength to convince the Flat Sand King. Since you don't believe in my strength, then who among you can come and fight with me? Chu Fengmian said with a confident smile. If anyone can withstand my sword, then I'll leave immediately. How about it? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the middle-aged men present were furious. Their realms were higher than Chu Fengmian's. Now, Chu Fengmian said that none of them could withstand his sword? This was arrogance to the extreme. What? Does this kid really think that there's no one in our army? How arrogant! Your Highness, let me do it. A brawny man sitting opposite Chu Fengmian stood up and said, These disciples of Wu Sheng Academy are all arrogant. If we don't teach him a lesson today, he won't give up. The Flat Sand King glanced at the brawny man and then at Chu Fengmian. He frowned. Yen Sun, don't hurt him. Yes. Yen Sun walked in front of Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Come. Let's see how you can defeat me with one sword. Good. In that case, I'll draw my sword. Chu Fengmian said calmly. The profound azure sword appeared in his hand. His feet moved and his body flickered slightly. He returned to his original position. All of this happened in an instant. It was as if Chu Fengmian was standing in his original position and hadn't moved at all. Kid, why aren't you making your move? Seeing Chu Fengmian not moving, The other middle-aged men laughed loudly. Don't tell me you don't have confidence and don't dare to make your move, however. Before they could finish their words, they all shut their mouths. Chapter 133. When did that happen? What a terrifying speed. It's hard to even see clearly. Those middle-aged men widened their eyes. They only saw Chu Fengmian's body move slightly. They couldn't even see clearly that Chu Fengmian had left a wound on Yen Sun's chest. The wound wasn't big, but if Chu Fengmian had used a little more strength, Yen Sun would have died under his sword. Yen Sun, who had reached the peak of the body refining realm, couldn't even withstand Chu Fengmian's sword. At the very least, only the strongest warrior at the second LV of the Spirit Sea realm among all the middle-aged men present could withstand this sword strike. Is there anyone else who doesn't believe in my strength? Chu Fengmian said with a smile. The middle-aged men all took a few steps back after hearing Chu Fengmian's word. They didn't even see Chu Fengmian's sword clearly. How could they withstand it? Only the warrior at the second level of the Divine Sea realm was still standing there. Young Master's swordsmanship is indeed superb. Let me, Hu Hanfei, experience your swordsmanship. Hu Hanfei took a step forward, looked at Chu Fengmian, and said coldly, although I'm a Divine Sea Realm warrior and it's inappropriate for me to deal with a junior, the strength of the Sand Bandit Chieftain is far above mine. If young Master can't defeat me, you'll just die in vain if you go to eliminate the Sand Bandit Chieftain. What Hu Hanfei said was right. The Flat Sand King beside him nodded in agreement. None of the middle-aged men present was a match for the Sand Bandit Chieftain. If Chu Fengmian couldn't defeat them, he couldn't eliminate the Sand Bandit Chieftain. It's okay. When warriors fight, their strength depends on themselves. There's no such thing as fairness, Chu Fengmian said with a smile. He was also worried that Hu Hanfei would be afraid of his Divine Sea Realm warrior and wouldn't fight with his full strength. His words dispelled Hu Hanfei's thoughts. Indeed, when real warriors fought, how could they be unwilling to fight because the opponent was weak? If Hu Hanfei was afraid, he wouldn't be convinced even if Chu Fengmian defeated him. Hu Hanfei said in a low voice, Young Master is indeed a wise man. All right, I won't hold back. Please be careful. Please. He hefted his profound azure sword and waited for Hu Hanfei to attack. Hu Hanfei let out a low growl. His figure was like a raging bull as he charged towards Chu Fengmian. This Hu Hanfei was also a body cultivator. His brute strength was frighteningly high. With a single punch, he smashed towards Chu Fengmian's chest. The profound azure sword in Chu Fengmian's hand spun, and the body of the sword rushed toward Hu Hanfei's fist wind to block it. Boom! When Hu Hanfei's fist wind smashed into the body of the dark green sword, a huge explosion was heard. The rebounding force shattered the tent. Break! Chu Fengmian indifferently spat out a word. He injected spiritual energy into the sword and abruptly exerted force. Hu Hanfei was forced back several meters before he finally came to a stop. A few drops of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Young Master is strong, this old man admires you. Hu Hanfei looked at Chu Fengmian and said respectfully with his head lowered. Just now, Chu Fengmian's fist had only collided with the body of the sword. The body of the sword was enough to force Hu Hanfei back several meters. If Chu Fengmian had used the body of the sword, Hu Hanfei would have been killed with a single strike. The strength of the two sides were not on the same level. With Chu Fengmian's strength, he would have been able to kill Hu Hanfei in less than 3 strikes. Hu Hanfei was actually defeated in a single strike. Could this disciple of the Martial Victory Academy really be so monstrous? Those middle-aged men looked at Chu Fengmian. There was no longer any contempt in their eyes. Instead, there was only admiration and envy. Only strength could prove oneself. Those middle-aged men couldn't help but curse themselves for being stupid in their hearts. Could the disciples of the Martial Victory Academy be judged with common sense? That was the gathering place of countless monstrous geniuses. If Chu Fengmian had the strength, How could he dare to take on such a character? 2 strikes, 2 victories. Even Hu Hanfei, whose strength had reached the 2nd level of the Divine Sea Realm, couldn't take a single strike from Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's words weren't boasting. He was a man of his word. Good. The Pingsha king turned pale with fright. Then, his face lit up with joy. As an inner disciple of the Martial Victory Academy, young Master's strength is indeed impressive. Young Master's strength has already proven that he is extremely powerful. In this case, there is hope to eliminate the Sand Bandits. The Pingsha king was also overjoyed. The stronger Chu Fengmian was, the greater the hope of eliminating the Sand Bandits. The Sand Bandits of the Northwest Barren Desert were a great threat to the Martial Victory country. If the Pingsha king could eliminate these Sand Bandits, his status would also be greatly improved. Chu Fengmian's arrival finally gave him hope to eliminate the Sand Bandit. My lord, where did these Sand Bandits come from? Chu Fengmian asked curiously. In his impression, Sand Bandits were ordinary people with some strength. However, compared to the regular army, they could only avoid the sharp edge. They didn't dare to confront head-on and could only hide. But now, according to the Pingsha king's words, these Sand Bandits didn't seem to be simple. Especially their leader, who was actually a LV3 Divine Sea Realm warrior and a disciple of the 4 major sections. Although the 4 major sects weren't as famous as the Martial Victory Academy in the Martial Victory country, they weren't far behind. The 4 major sects were forces that were beyond the control of the royal family of the Martial Victory country. Although their experts weren't as good as the Martial Victory Academy, they were still far behind. Chu Fengmian didn't expect that the disciples of the 4 major sects would come out to be Sand Bandit. Young Master, you may not know, but the Martial Victory country isn't as peaceful as you think. Hearing Chu Fengmian's question, the Pingsha king smiled bitterly. The leader of the Sand Bandits is called Mu Yuanhua. He used to be an inner disciple of the Candle Flame sect. For a spiritual weapon, he killed his fellow disciples and betrayed his sect. He came to the Northwest Barren Desert and collected several groups of Sand Bandit. Suddenly, he gathered more than 10,000 people. This group of Sand Bandits robbed the surrounding cities every day. Many city lords couldn't do anything about them. They could only offer them wealth in the grand competition for peace. But later, this Mu Yuanhua was said to have cultivated a kind of demonic skill. He devoured human flesh every day. His Sand Bandits broke into the city and massacred the city. This made the royal family angry and wanted to eliminate these Sand Bandit. Chapter 134. Demonic Cultivation Technique? Chu Fengmian frowned after hearing the Pingsha king's explanation. Demonic cultivation technique was actually the name given to those evil cultivation techniques in the 9 regions. Most of these cultivation techniques were extremely evil. Those who cultivated this demonic cultivation technique had always been feasting on human blood, slaughtering civilians and committing all kinds of evil deed. However, this kind of demonic skill was extremely fast to cultivate and its power was extremely high. Therefore, some martial artists would take the risk and cultivate this demonic skill. One of the 7 major sects, the 9 Demons City, started off by cultivating demonic cultivation technique. However, some experts in the 9 Demons City improved their cultivation techniques and removed them from the demonic path, becoming one of the 7 major sections. Those who cultivated demonic cultivation techniques were known as demons. Usually, they would be killed quickly when they appeared. Why hasn't this Mu Yuanhua been killed by others since he cultivated demonic cultivation techniques? Chu Fengmian frowned. The Sand Bandits of the Northwest Barren Desert had been growing for more than a year. The news of Mu Yuanhua cultivating demonic cultivation techniques should have been spread out long ago. Why would it be reported to the Wusheng Academy? Young Master, you may not know, but this Mu Yuanhua is extremely cunning. The Pingsha king replied after hearing Chu Fengmian's question. The cities that Mu Yuanhua chose to massacre were mostly remote and unfrequented cities. Therefore, he wasn't discovered in a short period of time. Moreover, this Mu Yuanhua is cunning. If he discovered that there were experts coming to kill him, he would hide. At most, he would let people kill some of the sand bandits. However, he would be safe and sound. Not long after, the strength of the sand bandits would grow even stronger. The Pingsha king looked at Chu Fengmian with anticipation in his eyes. This time, I would like to request young master to kill this Mu Yuanhua for the sake of the Northwest Barren Desert. It's my duty. This kind of demon must be killed. Chu Fengmian said. Your Highness, do you have a plan now? I have already found out where this Mu Yuanhua is hiding. The army is now ready. Now that young master is here, the army can be dispatched to kill this Mu Yuanhua. The Pingsha king said coldly. In order to kill Mu Yuanhua, he had already made a plan to find out where Mu Yuanhua was hiding. This time, he must kill Mu Yuanhua. Alright, there's no time to lose. Let's set off now. Chu Fengmian said. Naturally, it would be better to complete this mission as soon as possible. Moreover, for a devil like Mu Yuanhua, if he was allowed to live for another day, there would be even more people who would die in his hands. Good. Let's go. The Flat Sand King walked out of the tent and gave the order. Countless soldiers were reorganized. A troop of nearly 10,000 people marched toward the northwestern desert. Along the way, the army only encountered a few scattered sand bandits, but they were all captured and killed by the middle-aged men. It was already night time, and the army set up camp. For a martial artist at Chu Fengmian's level, it was naturally extremely easy for him to not sleep or rest for several days. But for those ordinary soldiers, their realm was far from reaching this point. Coupled with the fact that they were wearing heavy armor, one day was already their limit. If they did not rest at night, they would naturally be dispirited the next day. If they encountered the sand bandits, it would be even more dangerous. Young master, this Mu Yuanhua cultivates demonic arts, and his strength has increased greatly. If you are unable to resist him, young master can leave by yourself. The Flat Sand King looked at Chu Fengmian and said aloud. After all, eliminating the sand bandits is this king's matter. If something happens to young master, this king will not be able to explain it to Wusheng Academy. It's fine. Since this mission is accepted by this Chu, there is no reason for this Chu to escape. Hearing the Flat Sand King's words, Chu Fengmian revealed a confident smile. Moreover, no matter how strong this Mu Yuanhua is, this Chu is confident that I can kill him. Your Highness, just wait for the good news. Thank you for your auspicious words, young master. The Flat Sand King said. He then sat down and rested. Although it was a rest, no one dared to sleep. In this desert, the sand bandits were like wild wolves that could launch a sneak attack at any time. Chu Fengmian also leaned against a rock and closed his eyes to rest. He released his divine sense to observe every movement in the desert. Rustle. Under Chu Fengmian's full observation, countless footsteps suddenly sounded in the distance. These footsteps were orderly. Chu Fengmian felt as if there was a bloody aura erupting in the distance. Someone is coming. Chu Fengmian roared. Countless soldiers stood up one by one, looked into the distance, and tidied up their weapons. The sand bandits have appeared. In the distance, a group of sand bandits was like a swarm of locusts, rushing towards them. Each of these sand bandits had a strong smell of blood on their bodies. It was unknown how many living beings they had killed. Tens of thousands of sand bandits had appeared. This bloody aura made even the Flat Sand King show some fear on his face. Ha 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 ha, Flat Sand King, I didn't expect you to be so stupid. Instead of hiding outside, you actually dared to lead an army into the desert. Are you prepared to die for this venerable? In the sky, a cloud of blood mist suddenly appeared. This voice came from the blood mist. Mu Yuanhua. Seeing the blood mist, the Flat Sand King's face condensed. He didn't expect the real Mu Yuanhua to take the initiative to appear. This is Mu Yuanhua? Chu Fengmian looked at the blood mist and scanned it with his spiritual sense. Naturally, he saw a man who looked less than 30 years old in the blood mist. This man's body wasn't actually skin, but black scales. He looked like a demon. If an ordinary person were to see such an appearance, they would probably feel some fear in their hearts. The Flat Sand King looked at Mu Yuanhua and roared. Mu Yuanhua, this king has come today to destroy you, the devil. You can't escape today. Escape? Why should this venerable escape? This venerable's devil art has reached the large success stage. Do you think I'm afraid of a bunch of trash like you? Mu Yuanhua laughed arrogantly. Didn't you say that you've already asked the disciples of the Martial Victory Academy and the 4 major sects to kill this venerable? Today, this venerable's devil art has reached the large success stage. Even if the disciples of the Martial Victory Academy and the 4 major sects want to kill this venerable, it's absolutely impossible. A monster who has fallen into the devil's path dares to say that he has reached the large success stage of his devil art? How stupid. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian spoke. This voice was filled with disdain. This Mu Yuanhua's appearance was nothing more than the appearance of someone who had cultivated a devil art and had been eroded by it. Chu Fengmian had seen many such devils in his previous life. They were just trash who had failed to cultivate a devil art. Chapter 135. Damn it, who is it? Come out with me. Hearing Chu Fengmian's sarcasm, Mu Yuanhua was furious. In the blood mist, a rain of blood suddenly fell from the sky. Every drop of this blood rain was extremely corrosive. Ordinary warriors would lose their lives if they were touched by it. Die. With the blood of these 10,000 people, my demonic art will be complete. Mu Yuanhua laughed heartily. He cultivated the devil arts. The more people he killed, the more blood he could absorb and refine it into devil blood to increase his strength. You dare to be so arrogant with such a puny demonic art? Chu Fengmian laughed. With a stomp of his foot, his figure suddenly rushed into the sky. The sword in his hand flashed and turned into a sword barrier. The rain of blood was easily blocked by the sword in Chu Fengmian's hand. Your Highness, let me deal with this demon. You can deal with the other sand bandit. Chu Fengmian turned his head and said to Xian Shi King. Then, he rushed towards Mu Yuanhua and slashed out with his sword. Humph, I was wondering who it was. So it's the little guy from Wu Xing Academy? Looking at Chu Fengmian, Mu Yuanhua sneered. A little brat at the body refinement realm wants to kill me? Dream on. Blood rain demon. Mu Yuanhua laughed. Countless blood mist condensed around his body and turned into a blood-red demon. He rushed towards Chu Fengmian and clawed at him. A genius from Wu Xing Academy can also add a lot of strength to me. Didn't Wu Xing Academy want to kill me? I'll kill a genius today, and let Wu Xing Academy know how powerful I am. Mu Yuanhua laughed. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian was already a dead man. Even a Spirit Sea Realm warrior might not be able to withstand his claw. Only the top 10 inner disciples of the Wu Xing Academy would be able to withstand such a demonic skill. Looking at Chu Fengmian's appearance, he was extremely unfamiliar. He was most likely a newcomer. How could a newcomer resist his demonic art? You've only learned a little demonic art. You can't even control it, and you want to kill me? Chu Fengmian sneered. Break. As soon as Chu Fengmian's voice faded, the tip of his sword struck out. The bloody hand formed by Mu Yuanhua was shattered by the tip of Chu Fengmian's sword. Chu Fengmian easily dispelled it. Impossible. How can a little fellow at the body refinement realm possibly withstand this Empyrean's demonic skill? Seeing that his bloody hand was broken, Mu Yuanhua shouted in disbelief and crazily urged the devil power in his body. Blood demon descends. Bring disaster to the world. The blood-red figure wrapped around Mu Yuanhua's body became even larger as it crazily emitted a terrifying blood qi. It was unknown how many people he had killed in order to condense this blood qi. Chu Fengmian glanced over. This Mu Yuanhua must have killed at least 10,000 people to be able to condense such a thick blood qi. For the sake of cultivating the demonic arts, you slaughtered wantonly. You have already turned into a demon and become a true demon. Chu Fengmian looked at Mu Yuanhua and said coldly. This Mu Yuanhua had only cultivated the demonic arts for half a year, but he had already killed so many people in half a year. If this Mu Yuanhua was allowed to continue developing, it was very likely that he would become a great demon of the 9 regions. Becoming a demon? As long as I have power, so what if I become a demon? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the corner of Mu Yuanhua's mouth revealed a hint of ridicule. This Empyrean has already become a demon. The moment this Empyrean's demonic arts reach large success, I will destroy Wusheng Academy. I will destroy the 4 great sects. All living things are nourished by this Empyrean's flesh and blood. Then today, I will first break your demonic arts, so that you can no longer do evil. Chu Fengmian coldly snorted. Sword. The tip of the profound azure sword flashed, and a sword aura suddenly slashed towards Mu Yuanhua. Under this sword aura, the layer of bloody mist on Mu Yuanhua's body suddenly shattered, and his half-human, half-demon appearance was instantly exposed. What is this? A monster! This Mu Yuanhua, he is indeed a demon. Countless soldiers, and even some of the bandits, could not help but raise their heads. Seeing this scene, they all cried out loudly. The current Mu Yuanhua did not even have the slightest bit of human appearance. He was simply a true monster. Damn it, how could a little guy break this Empyrean's demonic arts? Seeing that his demonic arts had been broken, Mu Yuanhua also shouted out in disbelief. What he could not accept was that Chu Fengmian was only a body refinement realm martial artist. How could a body refinement realm martial artist defeat him? You hid your cultivation? Mu Yuanhua looked at Chu Fengmian and angrily said. Damn it, this Empyrean actually fell into your scheme today? But if you want to kill this Empyrean, it won't be that easy. As Mu Yuanhua spoke, a layer of bloody mist spread out from his body. Boom! With a sound, Mu Yuanhua's figure suddenly shattered, leaving behind a bloody light that fled towards the depths of the northwest desert. This Empyrean will remember today's enmity. When this Empyrean recovers his strength, this Empyrean will wash all the cities in the northwest desert with blood to avenge today's enmity. Mu Yuanhua's voice became more and more arrogant as he went further and further away. Not good, we can't let him go. The Pingsha king shouted. No matter how many of these bandits were killed, it would be useless. Only by killing Mu Yuanhua could the Northwest Desert's bandits be solved. Don't worry, Your Highness. This demon won't be able to escape. Chu Fengmian sneered. His figure also turned into a shadow and flew towards the direction where Mu Yuanhua had fled. Blood escape, I didn't expect this Mu Yuanhua to have such a profound escape technique. But with his strength, he shouldn't be able to last long. Under Chu Fengmian's feet, the phantom movement technique was fully activated. His speed was comparable to a martial artist at the peak of the Divine Sea realm. His figure flashed across the desert, and in an instant, he was 100 meters away, following the bloody light. This blood escape was one of the most profound escape techniques in the 9 regions. Its speed was extremely fast, but the price to pay was also great. Using blood escape would consume nearly half of one's blood essence. Without spending a few years, it would be impossible to recover, so it could only be used to save one's life. Chu Fengmian didn't expect Mu Yuanhua to know blood escape in this remote Wusheng country, so he let him escape temporarily. But he couldn't escape. Chu Fengmian's divine sense had completely locked onto him. The moment Mu Yuanhua prepared to rest, Chu Fengmian would kill him. Chapter 136. Senior Brother Feng, why is there a smell of blood in this desert? Could it be that the demon has been killed? A few warriors rode their horses into the desert. They were dressed luxuriously and were obviously disciples from powerful forces. Not necessarily. Since the demon's mission is still there, no one should have killed him yet. But it seems that someone has arrived before us. Senior Brother Feng got off his horse and observed the surroundings. Suddenly, he smelled a special smell of blood in the air. Blood escape. That devil was actually forced to use blood flight? Who is it? Could it be that the top 10 inner disciples of Wu Shing Academy have made a move? Senior Brother Feng's face changed. Blood escape was Mu Yuanhua's greatest life-saving technique. Now that it was forced out, it meant that Mu Yuanhua was now in a desperate situation. Let's go. Let's chase after that demon. Since he has been forced to use blood escape, he must be very weak now. Senior Brother Feng's eyes revealed some greed. This demon is a traitor of our Candle Flame sect. Even if we want to kill him, it should be done by our disciples. Everyone, get off your horses and fly. Let's chase after that demon. Yes. The 5 or 6 warriors behind Senior Brother Feng shouted in unison. They all got off their horses and flew into the air. These warriors had reached the Divine Sea Realm. They turned into streaks of light in the air and chased after the demon. Phew, that kid should have been shaken off. In the desert, Mu Yuanhua sat on the ground and rested in a dilapidated house. Where did such a terrifying kid come from? With just the body refining realm, he can force me to this extent. But so what? My blood escape is the fastest in the world. No one can catch up to me. As Mu Yuanhua spoke, his eyes revealed a look of hatred. Sooner or later, I will kill that kid and destroy Wu Shing Academy. Is that so? I'm afraid you won't have the chance. Before Mu Yuanhua could relax, a voice suddenly sounded. In front of him, a figure slowly condensed. It was Chu Fengmian. You. Seeing Chu Fengmian's sudden appearance, Mu Yuanhua's face completely changed. He had used blood escape and consumed half of his essence blood to get rid of Chu Fengmian. But now Chu Fengmian had caught up so quickly. Who are you? I have never heard of a disciple like you in Wu Shing Academy. There was no way out now. Mu Yuanhua. Even if he was to die, he wanted to be a ghost that knew the truth. In his opinion, among the inner disciples of Wu Shing Academy, only the top 10 disciples could kill him. But looking at Chu Fengmian's appearance, he was so young and unfamiliar. Obviously, he wasn't familiar with him. Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian. Since this Mu Yuanhua wanted to die, there was no harm in Chu Fengmian wanting him to die knowing the truth. Chu Fengmian. Mu Yuanhua silently repeated this voice and suddenly thought of something. Chu Fengmian, the newcomer Marshal Wu Shing Academy this year? The person who broke the record of Lingtian? Although Mu Yuanhua lived in the desert, he had a lot of information. He was very familiar with Chu Fengmian's name. Wasn't this the newcomer Marshal Wu Shing Academy's newcomer king that caused a commotion a few days ago? The news of Chu Fengmian breaking the Lingtian record had already spread throughout Wu Shing country. Even he had heard of it. That's right. Chu Fengmian looked at Mu Yuanhua and said coldly, Since you already know, then you can be a ghost that knows the truth. Wait, Chu Fengmian. As long as you're willing to let me go, I can give you one of the 3 divine weapons of Candle Flame sect, the Scarlet Flame Sword. Mu Yuanhua hurriedly shouted. If you kill me, you'll only get 2,000 contribution points at most. But if you let me go, I can give you the Scarlet Flame Sword. Scarlet Flame Sword? Chu Fengmian knew from the Pingsha King that Mu Yuanhua betrayed Candle Flame sect for a spiritual weapon. He didn't expect it to be one of the 3 divine weapons of Candle Flame sect, the Scarlet Flame Sword. The 3 divine weapons of Candle Flame sect were all mid-grade earth-grade spiritual weapons. They were much better than Chu Fengmian's profound azure sword. If he could obtain the Scarlet Flame Sword, it would be more useful than 2,000 contribution points for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian said coldly. Where's the Scarlet Flame Sword? If you agree to let me go, then I'll tell you." Before Mu Yuanhua finished speaking, Chu Fengmian's sword was already at his neck. "You don't have the right to bargain. Speak, where's the scarlet flame sword?" Chu Fengmian coldly asked. Bang! Just as Chu Fengmian finished speaking, a huge wave of spiritual energy rushed over. The entire door was broken by this wave of spiritual energy. Then, several cultivators entered the room. Seeing Mu Yuanhua on the ground, their eyes were filled with excitement. "This demon is really here! Junior Brother Chang, Junior Brother One, the two of you go capture that demon and take him away," Senior Brother Feng, who was the leader, said with a cold and arrogant face. Chu Fengmian, who didn't even take a look, directly shouted out and ordered them to take Mu Yuanhua away. When Chu Fengmian heard this, he couldn't help but frown. Mu Yuanhua was his prey. This group of people wanted to take Mu Yuanhua away indiscriminately. They didn't put him in their eyes. Boom! Just as Junior Brother Chang and Junior Brother Wen stepped forward and wanted to take Mu Yuanhua away, Chu Fengmian's sword suddenly fell. A wave of spiritual energy burst out and forced the two of them back. "This Mu Yuanhua is this Chu's prey. You're late," Chu Fengmian coldly said. Chu Fengmian didn't have any good impression of this group of people. His words were also extremely cold. "You dare to attack." After Junior Brother Chang and Junior Brother Wen were forced back, they looked at Chu Fengmian with hostility. The spiritual energy in their bodies suddenly exploded, as if they were about to burst out at any time. Senior Brother Feng, who was the leader, took the initiative to speak. "This brother should be a disciple of the Martial Victory Academy, right? We're the inner disciples of the Candle Flame sect. This demon is a traitor of our Candle Flame sect. How about giving me face? We'll take this demon away." Senior Brother Feng spoke while giving a signal with his eyes. The remaining few people also walked towards Mu Yuanhua, wanting to capture him and take him away. "I'll see who dares." Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold and a wave of spiritual energy suddenly burst out. Chapter 137. Senior Brother Feng frowned when he saw Chu Fengmian attacking again. "Brother, what do you mean? Do you not want to give face to our Candle Flame sect?" "Senior Brother Feng, why are you talking so much nonsense with this kid? Let's just take this devil away and see if this kid dares to stop us." Junior Brother Chang coldly snorted and glanced at Chu Fengmian before walking towards Mu Yuanhua. He extended his hand and was about to grab Mu Yuanhua. A sword tip suddenly appeared. "Ah!" With a scream, Junior Brother Chang hastily retreated. His hand that was about to grab Mu Yuanhua was cut off by the sword. "If you dare to move, you'll die." Chu Fengmian glanced at Junior Brother Chang and coldly said. He meant what he said. Mu Yuanhua was his prey and this group of people wanted to take Mu Yuanhua away? Dream on. Aren't you being too heavy-handed? Junior Brother Chang was just joking with you and you cut off his hand? Senior Brother Feng looked at Chu Fengmian and coldly said. "I see that you really don't want to give face to our Candle Flame sect." "Face? When have I ever cared about the Candle Flame sect?" Chu Fengmian disdainfully said. This disdain came from Chu Fengmian's heart. The 7 major sects didn't have any face in front of him. What was a small Candle Flame sect to him? Today, whoever dared to touch Mu Yuanhua would die. Mu Yuanhua is this Chu's prey. Whoever dares to touch him will die. Chu Fengmian coldly said. Facing the 5 to 6 disciples of the Candle Flame sect, Chu Fengmian didn't have the slightest fear. Senior Brother Feng, this kid is too arrogant. He doesn't give face to our Candle Flame sect. If he takes this devil away today, where will our Candle Flame sect put our face? Junior Brother Wen said. Although his words were for the Candle Flame sect's face, his eyes were filled with greed when he looked at Mu Yuanhua. Mu Yuanhua was worth 10,000 contribution points in the Candle Flame sect. Senior Brother Feng's expression changed a few times before he coldly said. You're just a nobody and you dare to be so arrogant? Looks like this batch of Martial Victory Academy's newcomers are really arrogant to the extreme. Looks like as your senior, I'll have to teach you a lesson from Wuxing Academy, lest you go out and shoot your mouth off. Go beat this brat until he's severely injured. Let's see if he can still be so stubborn. As soon as senior martial brother Feng finished speaking, several disciples suddenly rushed towards Chu Fengmian. The hands of the disciples were engulfed in flames. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a sea of fire and surrounded them. He had said that he would seriously injure Chu Fengmian. However, each of his moves was fatal. A martial artist would have died long ago if he had been burned by the flames. How could he be seriously injured? Kid, do you know who the person in front of you is? Feng Huoye, the genius ranked 9th in our Candle Flame Sect's inner sect. You dare to go against us? Looks like you really want to die. Junior brother Wen shouted. His body was covered in flames, and he turned into a flaming man. He rushed towards Chu Fengmian. My name is Wen Yang. They are the ones who killed you today. When you die, you must remember who killed you. Wen Yang laughed loudly and threw a punch at Chu Fengmian. He had reached the second level of the Divine Sea Realm. It wasn't easy for him to deal with a body-refining realm martial artist. He could easily kill Chu Fengmian. There's no need to remember the name of a dead man, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Chu Fengmian's words caused the other Candle Flame Sect's warriors to burst into laughter. The name of a dead man? Could it be that Chu Fengmian was naive enough to think that he was a match for so many Candle Flame Sect's martial artists? I thought you were a genius. It turns out that you're just an idiot. Just a piece of trash. Feng Huoye said with a cold smile. Wen Yang, don't waste time. Hurry up and kill this kid. We're going back to the sect. Okay. Wen Yang laughed. He didn't waste any time. His fist condensed a scarlet flame and smashed towards Chu Fengmian. This scarlet flame was the Candle Flame Sect's unique fire controlling technique. Its temperature was extremely high. Even a Divine Sea Realm martial artist might not be able to withstand it. The flame followed the fist wind and rushed towards Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. For a moment there was no movement from him. Ha ha, I thought you were some kind of expert. So, you're just this kind of trash? Looking at Chu Fengmian in the sea of fire, Wen Yang laughed. However, his laughter came to an abrupt halt in the next second. The flame of the Candle Flame Sect is nothing more than this. The sword flashed. The flame in front of Chu Fengmian was easily cut open and shattered. Wen Yang, who was still laughing a second ago, had a bloody wound on his throat. Blood gushed out. A sword to the throat. Wen Yang, who was still arrogant a second ago, had died under Chu Fengmian's sword. Junior brother Wen. Seeing Wen Yang fall to the ground, Feng Huoye's expression changed greatly. Originally, they thought that dealing with a body-refining realm martial artist would be a piece of cake. Since when did a body-refining realm martial artist have the strength to kill a Divine Sea Realm martial artist? Furthermore, a sword to the throat? Especially on Chu Fengmian's body. There was not a single wound. Chu Fengmian was actually unharmed in the sea of fire? Who's the next one to throw away his life? Chu Fengmian's hand shook. The blood on the edge of the dark green sword was shaken to the ground. It was as if he was cleaning up the filth of the blood. Little bastard! You dared to kill junior brother Wen. The several Candle Flame Sect's disciples were all enraged. Countless flames attacked Chu Fengmian at the same time. The flames turned the room Chu Fengmian was in into a sea of fire. You're all here to throw away your life? It doesn't matter. Chu Fengmian revealed a mocking smile. In Chu Fengmian's eyes, the attacks of these people were as clumsy as clowns. The sword in his hand flashed. Countless rays of sword light flashed. The Candle Flame Sect's disciples, who were still attacking earlier, fell to the ground one by one. There was also a bloody scar on their throat. All of them had been slashed by a sword. A group of Divine Sea Realm martial artists besieging a body-refining realm martial artist. Unexpectedly, they were all killed by a sword to the throat. If this were to spread out, no one would believe it. This was something that even the former Ji Lingtian couldn't do. Who exactly are you? Feng Huoya's eyes were fixed on Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's attack was definitely not a nameless person. Especially Chu Fengmian's appearance, which was extremely unfamiliar. Feng Huoya had never heard of such a person appearing in the Wuxing Academy. Chapter 138. Chu Fengmian. It's you. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Feng Huoya was stunned at first, then greed appeared in his eyes. I didn't expect that you would dare to come out after offending the Crown Prince. Your life is much more valuable than that traitor's. In order to kill you, the Crown Prince offered 100,000 contribution points in the black market. Today I've met him. Oh? Black market? Is this Chu's life really that valuable? Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with surprise. Chu Fengmian had heard of the black market before. In the Wuxing country, there was another major force besides the Wuxing Academy and the 4 major sections. It was the black market. In the black market, there were cultivators, elixirs, and even assassins with bounties. As long as you had money, you could get anything in the black market. 100,000 contribution points? This makes me want to capture myself and sell myself in the black market. Ling Lingtian is really generous, Chu Fengmian said with a cold smile. What he said was true. 100,000 contribution points meant 300,000 qi amassing pills. Chu Fengmian might not be able to accumulate such wealth even if he saved it for a long time. However, this was only a joke. Nevertheless, the price was indeed not low. 100,000 contribution point. Even some warriors at the high levels of the Divine Sea Realm would be tempted. Although it was not enough to invite a wind-controlling realm cultivator, if some high-level Divine Sea Realm cultivators came to trouble Chu Fengmian, it would not be easy for him to deal with them. It seemed that Chu Fengmian had to be careful. Feng Huoya said with a cold smile. Chu Fengmian, I don't care about the grudge between you and the Crown Prince. However, I will still take your life so that I can get the money from the black market. Is that so? You think you can kill me? Chu Fengmian said with a mocking smile. Those disciples of the Candle Flame sect were full of confidence. Now, they had all died under Chu Fengmian's sword. Chu Fengmian could tell that Feng Huoya was at the 3rd tier of the Divine Sea Realm, which was even weaker than Mu Yuanhua. Chu Fengmian wanted to see where Feng Huoya's confidence came from. Kid, don't be too confident. Although your swordsmanship is strong and is able to surpass levels to battle, your cultivation level is still at the 7th level of the body refinement stage. In front of a truly overwhelming strength, this kind of small trick is meaningless. Feng Huoya sneered. He suddenly took out a red medicinal pellet from his hand. Then, he swallowed it. As soon as the red elixir entered his mouth, Feng Huoya's realm began to climb rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had reached the 7th level of the Spirit Sea Realm. I spent 5,000 contribution points to buy this explosive blood pill from the black market. I originally planned to use it to deal with that traitor, but today you're much more valuable than that traitor. After swallowing the explosive blood pill, the spiritual energy in Feng Huoya's body became frantic and violent. As he spoke, one could feel a trace of malevolence in his voice. A total of 9 levels. Let's see how you're going to contend against me today. Feng Huoya laughed loudly. His body suddenly moved, and a scarlet flame suddenly condensed on his body. This scarlet flame was much stronger than the flame condensed by the disciples of the Candle Flame sect. The scorching flame immediately forced Chu Fengmian to retreat. The cultivation method of the Candle Flame sect was to control all kinds of flames. The stronger one's strength was, the more powerful the flame would be. Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the ancient war dragon. Although his body couldn't be compared to a real ancient war dragon, it was still much stronger than ordinary warriors. Chu Fengmian didn't care about the flames condensed by the disciples of the Candle Flame sect because they couldn't hurt him. But now, Feng Huoya's realm had been forcibly raised to the 7th level of the Divine Sea Realm. His flame had also become extremely scorching. Chu Fengmian understood that even if he had the bloodline of the ancient war dragon, his body would still be burned by the flame. Explosive blood pill, is your trump card a pill that overdraws on your body? Chu Fengmian looked at Feng Huoya. Feng Huoya's expression remained unchanged. This explosive blood pill was powerful enough to increase the strength of a venerable warrior by 4 levels. But this increase wasn't his own strength. Feng Huoya's current strength was at most equivalent to the 6th level of the Divine Sea Realm. With your current realm, you can only maintain the pill's efficacy for 5 minutes at most. Chu Fengmian looked at Feng Huoya and sneered. As a Grandmaster Alchemist, Chu Fengmian had concocted many pills that overdrew the body in his previous life. This explosive blood pill could only be considered as a low-grade pill with extremely severe side effects. After taking it, one's realm could be increased by 4 levels in a short period of time. But once the pill's efficacy ran out, one would be weakened for at least a year. This kind of pill couldn't be taken unless it was absolutely necessary. After all, it was equivalent to overdrawing a warrior's aptitude for a year. For a martial artist, every year of their youth was extremely precious. At least for Chu Fengmian himself, he would never do such a foolish thing. So what? 5 minutes is enough to kill you. Feng Huoya laughed heartily when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. As long as I can kill you and that traitor, and bring you back for the reward, this price is nothing. You should just give up, boy. Not even Grand Emperor Richlush would be able to save you if he were here. If Grand Emperor Richlush couldn't do it, do you think I can't? Chu Fengmian looked at Feng Huoya with a mocking smile. Who said that Chu Fengmian couldn't do what Grand Emperor Richlush couldn't? Grand Emperor Richlush was nothing more than an expert from a remote country. In his previous life, Chu Fengmian could be said to have dominated the 9 realms. Still so stubborn? Fine. I'll beat you up first. Let's see if you can still be so stubborn. Feng Huoya snorted coldly. Raging flames incinerate the earth. Feng Huoya roared, and a mass of flames suddenly spread out from his body. Suddenly, everything around him turned into a sea of fire. The place where Chu Fengmian stood was already filled with flames. Only a vague figure could be seen standing amidst the flames. Humph. You've been so stubborn for so long. You can't even resist this level of fire? What a waste of a violent blood pill. Feng Huoya curled his lips. He could no longer sense Chu Fengmian's aura. As far as he was concerned, Chu Fengmian had long since been buried in the sea of fire. The temperature of the flames was enough to instantly kill a divine sea realm warrior. It wouldn't be surprising if Chu Fengmian died in the sea of fire. Chapter 139. You want to hurt me with this level of flame? A mocking voice suddenly came from behind Feng Huoya. A chill flashed across Feng Huoya's body. Chu Fengmian was still alive. Chu Fengmian was still alive under that sea of fire. Who was that figure in the sea of fire? When he looked at the sea of fire again, the figure had already disappeared. A shadow. By the time Feng Huoya reacted, Chu Fengmian's figure had already quietly appeared behind him. Chu Fengmian clenched his fist and punched at Feng Huoya. Using your fist? Competing in strength? You're digging your own grave. Feng Huoya laughed disdainfully at Chu Fengmian's punch. After swallowing the explosive blood pill, his strength had reached the 7th tier of the Divine Sea Realm. If Chu Fengmian kept dodging, Feng Huoya might not be able to deal with him. But if he wanted to compete in strength, wasn't Chu Fengmian courting death? Die! Feng Huoya turned around and punched at Chu Fengmian as well. His cultivation level was 9 tiers higher than Chu Fengmian's. How could he be weaker than Chu Fengmian in terms of strength? Bang! When the two fists collided, a huge amount of spiritual energy spread out. What Feng Huoya expected was that Chu Fengmian would be sent flying by the punch. Did not happen. Instead, when the two fists collided, the strength of both sides was actually equal. Did this mean that Chu Fengmian's strength was not weaker than Feng Huolie's? It was even enough to compete with Feng Huolie's strength. How is this possible? The shock in Feng Huolie's eyes revealed his thoughts. How could a martial artist in the 7th tier of the body refining realm compete with a martial artist in the 7th tier of the divine sea realm? Even the reborn great Emperor Richlush, the #1 expert of the victorious martial nation, could not do this. Feng Huolie's arm was even numb from the impact of the punch. But Chu Fengmian's expression showed that he was still very relaxed. Could it be that this brat is a demonic beast in disguise? How could he be so strong? Feng Huolie cursed inwardly. Chu Fengmian's strength was not something a martial artist could possess. There was a difference of 9 whole levels between them, and he was still able to contend with the other party in terms of strength without being at a disadvantage. This was something that was absolutely impossible to achieve, and it was actually happening right before his eyes. Like I said, just because Grand Emperor Richlush couldn't do it doesn't mean I can't. Chu Fengmian sneered. He clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it toward Feng Huolie. The speed of this punch was even faster than the previous one. The bloodline of the ancient war dragon was boiling in Chu Fengmian's body. Boundless fighting spirit erupted from his body. The 5 drops of primordial war dragon blood essence had already dyed Chu Fengmian's blood golden. Now, Chu Fengmian's skin seemed to have a golden glow. I don't believe that you still have that much power, Feng Huolie roared. For a body-refining realm martial artist to erupt with such terrifying power, he must have consumed an enormous amount of spiritual power. It was already not easy for Chu Feng to throw out the first punch. He did not believe that Mian High Goods would have such terrifying power for the second punch. Once again, he punched out. However, in this confrontation, Feng Huolie's thoughts were wrong once again. Chu Fengmian's punch was even harder and stronger than the previous one. Feng Huolie was even able to sense that his right arm was starting to become numb. This was because the confrontation of power was too intense, causing his right arm to nearly lose all feeling. This caused him to involuntarily take a step back. What? You don't want my head anymore? Chu Fengmian laughed when he saw Feng Huolie take a step back. Then, he moved his feet and closed in on Feng Huolie. Bam! Another punch was thrown out. With this punch, Feng Huolie's body was sent flying several meters away. One of his arms had been broken by Chu Fengmian's punch. How could a body-refining realm martial artist have such a terrifying body? Even a martial artist at the peak of the divine sea realm shouldn't be able to throw out so many punches without rest. Feng Huolie screamed inwardly. This scene was beyond his knowledge. Normal warriors, even those at the peak of the spirit sea realm, would lose some of their spiritual power every time they threw out a punch. The power of each punch would be weakened due to the consumption of spiritual energy. This was what an ordinary martial artist was like. However, someone like Chu Fengmian, whose every punch was even stronger than the previous one, did not need to recover his spiritual energy. This was unheard of. The battle dragon spell that Chu Fengmian cultivated allowed him to become more powerful the more he fought. The power of his next punch would become stronger and stronger. In addition, the divine veins in Chu Fengmian's body could continuously replenish his spiritual energy. Therefore, Chu Fengmian did not need to worry about the consumption of his spiritual energy. With an endless supply of spiritual energy, Chu Fengmian could naturally throw out punches without a care. Bam! 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 Chu Fengmian's body kept flickering. In the sky, Feng Huolie's body was like a sandbag. Being hit here and there, his body was already covered with cuts and bruises. If he had not taken the explosive blood pill, he would have already been beaten to death. However, the explosive blood pill could only sustain his life. He did not even have the strength to resist. Under each of Chu Fengmian's punches, Feng Huolie was on the verge of death. Die! Boom! After the last punch, Feng Huolie's body rolled on the ground. He was no longer breathing. A martial artist at the third level of the Divine Sea Realm was actually beaten to death by Chu Fengmian after taking the explosive blood pill. Mu Yuanhua, who had witnessed all of this from the side, was already scared to death. He originally thought that the battle between Chu Fengmian and Feng Huolie would be a lose-lose situation, giving him a chance to escape. However, this Feng Huolie was now easily beaten to death by Chu Fengmian. It could not be said to be easy. It was simply not on the same level of strength. It was as if Chu Fengmian was only a Divine Sea Realm martial artist, while Feng Huolie, who was being suppressed by Chu Fengmian, was only a body refinement realm martial artist. Chu Fengmian glanced at Feng Huolie's corpse on the ground. With a grab of his hand, Feng Huolie's storage pouch was taken by Chu Fengmian. At the same time, the storage pouches of the remaining Candle Flame sect's disciples were all taken by Chu Fengmian. These people wanted to kill Chu Fengmian and snatch Mu Yuanhua. Now that they were dead, it could only be said that they deserved more than death. Towards his enemies, Chu Fengmian never had the slightest bit of mercy. As long as it was an enemy, only death awaited them. Now you should tell me where the Scarlet Flame Sword is. Chapter 140. The Scarlet Flame Sword is in an ancient castle. I hid the Scarlet Flame Sword there. With my strength, I'm still unable to use the Scarlet Flame Sword, so I hid it in an ancient castle. I'll take it when I can use it in the future. Mu Yuanhua was stunned for a moment before he hastily replied. Seeing Feng Huolie being easily killed by Chu Fengmian, Mu Yuanhua no longer had any thoughts of resistance. He could only obediently obey. He also understood that if he didn't listen to Chu Fengmian's words, there would only be one outcome: death. Take me to get it, Chu Fengmian coldly shouted. With Mu Yuanhua's strength, he was indeed unable to control a mid-grade Earth-level spiritual artifact. To activate a spiritual artifact, one must consume spiritual energy. The higher the grade of the spiritual artifact, the greater the consumption of spiritual energy. Of course, this was only for ordinary cultivators. For Chu Fengmian, who had divine veins, ordinary spiritual artifacts wouldn't cause any burden to him. However, some truly powerful spiritual artifacts, such as the abundant Lush Monument and the mysterious Star Sword, were things that Chu Fengmian couldn't control. He was also clear that if he wanted to truly control these two spiritual artifacts, he would need to be even more powerful. However, the Scarlet Flame Sword was clearly not in this category. As long as Chu Fengmian could obtain it, he could exchange it for the Profound Azure Sword. At that time, the power of Chu Fengmian's sword technique would be even more terrifying. Yes. Mu Yuanhua stood up and hurriedly led Chu Fengmian into the desert. After walking for less than 2 hours, a dilapidated ancient castle suddenly appeared in the desert. This dilapidated ancient castle looked like it had been through countless years. In this boundless desert, it was extremely inconspicuous. The Scarlet Flame Sword is inside. Mu Yuanhua walked to the front of the ancient castle and said to Chu Fengmian. In his eyes, it seemed like he was thinking of something. Okay. Chu Fengmian glanced at the ancient castle and walked inside. However, just as Chu Fengmian was about to take a step into the ancient castle, his figure suddenly moved. He suddenly appeared beside Mu Yuanhua and shot out spiritual energy towards Mu Yuanhua, grabbing him in his hand. He directly threw him into the ancient castle. No! When Mu Yuanhua saw Chu Fengmian's actions, his eyes revealed a bit of fear. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian to do this. Bang! Mu Yuanhua's body was thrown into the castle, and in that instant, hiss! Countless sharp swords suddenly filled the ancient castle. Under the countless sharp swords, Mu Yuanhua's body was also pierced full of holes and lost all signs of life. As expected, Chu Fengmian wasn't surprised to see this. Chu Fengmian could already see that there was something wrong with Mu Yuanhua's actions. The Scarlet Flame Sword was a spiritual weapon that Mu Yuanhua was willing to part with from the Candle Flame sect. How could he give it to Chu Fengmian so easily? At the very least, Mu Yuanhua would definitely struggle for a while. It was impossible for him to give up so easily. There was definitely a trap in this. However, this trap could only be eaten by Mu Yuanhua himself. Although you'll definitely die in my hands, I'm afraid that you'll be even more unwilling to die in the trap that you've personally set up. Chu Fengmian coldly smiled and no longer bothered with Mu Yuanhua. He only grabbed Mu Yuanhua's corpse and placed it into a storage pouch. The requirement to complete the mission was Mu Yuanhua's corpse. Chu Fengmian naturally had to bring him back to the academy. However, what Mu Yuanhua said earlier wasn't all a lie. In the ancient castle, Chu Fengmian used his spiritual sense and suddenly discovered a secret chamber. In this secret chamber, there was an extremely sharp sword intent that couldn't be hidden from Chu Fengmian's eyes. As a sword cultivator, he was naturally extremely familiar with it. With a glance, he could tell that it was definitely a spiritual sword that wasn't of a low grade. It could only be one of the 3 divine weapons of the Candle Flame sect, the Scarlet Flame Sword. Along the way, there were many traps in the ancient castle. However, most of them were already detected by Chu Fengmian and the traps were easily broken. Finally, he broke through a stone door and arrived at the secret chamber. The secret chamber was extremely dark. However, with a glance, Chu Fengmian saw countless elixirs piled up at the side. Qi Gathering Elixir. This Qi Gathering Elixir wasn't only owned by the Wuxing Academy. Although it could only be refined by the Wuxing Academy, the Wuxing Academy would also sell it to the other 4 great sects at a fair price. It could be said that it was a common elixir among the 4 great sections. With a glance, Chu Fengmian could see that there were at least 1,000,000 Qi Gathering Elixirs in this secret chamber. I've finally struck it rich. This thought emerged in Chu Fengmian's mind. These Qi Gathering Elixirs were absolutely beyond Chu Fengmian's imagination. He never thought that Mu Yuanhua would actually gather such a huge amount of wealth. However, when he thought about it, Chu Fengmian didn't find it strange. The sand bandits controlled by Mu Yuanhua numbered in the tens of thousands. They would frequently plunder cities and force cities to pay tribute. Most of the wealth was controlled by Mu Yuanhua alone. This also allowed him to accumulate such a huge amount of wealth. It was no wonder that Mu Yuanhua was willing to leave the sect and come to the Northwest Desert to be a sand bandit. This wealth and resources were much better than when he was in the sect. However, this wealth was ultimately not his. Even if Mu Yuanhua didn't die in Chu Fengmian's hands, he would die in the hands of others. After all, what Mu Yuanhua did was against the natural order. Sooner or later, he would be beheaded. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and countless elixirs were placed into his storage pouch. Among them, the Qi Gathering Elixirs were placed into a separate storage pouch by Chu Fengmian. As for the rest of the healing elixirs and elixirs like the Blood Eruption Elixir, they were placed into another storage pouch by Chu Fengmian. These elixirs were meaningless to Chu Fengmian. It was useless for him to keep them. However, he could go back and sell them in exchange for Qi Gathering Elixirs. Although 1,000,000 Qi Gathering Elixirs seemed like a huge amount, Chu Fengmian knew that it was impossible to feed the ancient war dragon's shadow in his body with this amount of elixirs. At most, it could help Chu Fengmian condense 3 drops of ancient war dragon's blood essence. This was already the limit. However, Chu Fengmian had just made a breakthrough and needed to consolidate his realm. For a moment, he didn't want to continue condensing the ancient war dragon's blood essence. He could keep it. After all, this wealth would definitely have many uses in the future. After the elixirs were taken away, the only thing left in the secret chamber was a scarlet spiritual sword. Chapter 141. The Scarlet Flame Sword was entirely red. It was forged with a special type of scarlet flame iron. It was 7 feet long and was an out-and-out heavy sword. The material used to forge the Scarlet Flame Sword is good, but the forging method is too crude. Chu Fengmian glanced at the Scarlet Flame Sword and said in a low voice, The material used to forge the scarlet flame sword was scarlet flame iron. It was a kind of black iron from outer space. It was born with strong fire spiritual energy and was the perfect material to forge a fire-type spiritual weapon. If the scarlet flame iron was given to a master blacksmith to forge, it might even reach the level of a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Even if it was not enough, it could easily be forged into a top-grade earth-grade spiritual weapon. However, the grade of the scarlet flame sword was only middle-grade earth-grade. It was no wonder that Chu Fengmian felt that the forging method of the scarlet flame sword was too crude. It could even be said that it was a waste of a heavenly treasure. There were 7 lines carved on it, but Chu Fengmian felt that the 7 lines were also crude. If it was properly forged, the power of the scarlet flame sword might be several times more powerful than it was now. Although this spiritual weapon has already been finalized and it's impossible to refine it again, the array on it can still be redrawn. Chu Fengmian glanced at the scarlet flame sword and whispered to himself. He suddenly walked over and picked up the scarlet flame sword. The moment Chu Fengmian picked up the scarlet flame sword, a flame suddenly emerged and burned Chu Fengmian's hand. The scarlet flame sword already had a spirit. It could only be controlled by someone who conquered it and became its master. It's just a spiritual weapon. You want to resist me? Chu Fengmian frowned. All the spiritual energy in his body burst out. Suddenly, endless dragon power filled Chu Fengmian's body. Dragon power was an extremely domineering pressure. The scarlet flame sword felt Chu Fengmian's dragon power and retreated a little. How could a spiritual weapon dare to resist the majesty of an ancient war dragon? The flame on its body was immediately extinguished, and it was under Chu Fengmian's control. Break! Chu Fengmian roared, and a surge of spiritual energy rushed towards the scarlet flame sword. The scarlet flame sword wanted to resist, but in front of Chu Fengmian's dragon power, it could only obediently give up. He allowed Chu Fengmian's spiritual power to break all 7 patterns on the scarlet flame sword. I wonder how many lines I can inscribe with my current strength. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself in his heart. In his previous life, he had been a grandmaster alchemist. Chu Fengmian had also learned how to carve lines. At that time, Chu Fengmian didn't have any spiritual power. He could use the power of the pill furnace to refine pills, but he couldn't carve the lines. It could be said that this was Chu Fengmian's first time carving lines with his own hand. Even Chu Fengmian himself didn't know what kind of effect it would produce. Carve all the power veins. The heavy sword has no edge, but the power must be strong. Unlike light swords that relied on techniques to fight, heavy swords didn't require much technique when swinging. Instead, it was purely a collision of strength. To use absolute strength to suppress the enemy, the heavy sword's power must be strong. Normally, when carving lines on a spiritual weapon, one would choose to carve lines that would reduce the spiritual power consumption of the spiritual weapon. This would allow the user to reduce the consumption of spiritual power. However, this would also reduce the number of lines that would be carved. For example, an earth-level spiritual weapon could only carve 9 lines at the end of the day. This way, a portion of the weapon's power would be lost. However, this was still extremely important to countless spirit masters. However, to Chu Fengmian, it was meaningless. He had the holy pulse and his spiritual power was endless. The lines that reduced the consumption of spiritual power were meaningless to Chu Fengmian. What he wanted to carve now were all power veins. This would make the scarlet flame sword's power even more powerful. Chu Fengmian silently muttered in his heart. A wave of spiritual power separated and condensed into lines in front of Chu Fengmian. It moved according to Chu Fengmian's thoughts. These 3 runes were aimed at the scarlet flame sword. Hiss! They were forcefully carved onto the scarlet flame sword. With the addition of the 3 lines, Chu Fengmian immediately felt that the power of the scarlet flame sword in his hand was definitely stronger by 50% compared to before. The carving of the first 3 lines was extremely easy. This made Chu Fengmian's heart slowly gain some confidence. Continue. How could 3 lines be enough to satisfy Chu Fengmian? Chu Fengmian's sword must be extremely powerful. Only then would it be worthy of him. Condense. A wave of spiritual power slowly floated out and condensed into 3 lines. These 3 lines were all lines that increased the power of the sword. Once again, they rushed towards the scarlet flame sword and struck it. Hiss! Hiss! This time, the scarlet flame sword was starting to show signs of resistance. If one did not possess absolute skill and sufficient strength, the scarlet flame sword would instantly suffer a backlash when the rune was inserted into it. Carve it for me! Chu Fengmian roared. The spiritual power in his body completely exploded. The 3 lines were tightly pressed onto the scarlet flame sword by a wave of spiritual power. Soon, Chu Fengmian saw it. On the scarlet flame sword, another 3 runes had been carved out. 6 lines had been carved. The current power of the scarlet flame sword was already much stronger than before Chu Fengmian started practicing it again. Although the previous scarlet flame sword had 7 lines, in fact, the lines were extremely complicated. However, the current scarlet flame sword had 6 lines, all of which were used to increase the power of the sword. Therefore, in terms of power, it was a bit stronger than the previous scarlet flame sword. Perhaps only Chu Fengmian alone could endure such refinement. If an ordinary martial artist were to use this scarlet flame sword, they would only be able to make a few strikes before their spirit power would be exhausted. 6 lines. The power of the scarlet flame sword was already considered good. However, this was far from enough to satisfy Chu Fengmian. What Chu Fengmian wanted to carve was a total of 9 lines. When the 9 lines were carved at the same time, the power that was activated by each other would definitely be twice as strong as the 6 lines. Continue. Condense. Another 3 runes condensed in the air. This time, 3 runes condensed in the air. Seal. Chu Fengmian's mind moved. The 3 lines were once again carved on the scarlet flame sword. Blood as the seal. Battle dragon as the sword. The moment the 3 lines were formed, Chu Fengmian immediately cut his finger with the edge of the sword. A drop of golden blood dripped onto the scarlet flame sword. Immediately, the 3 lines were carved on the sword. Chapter 142. The sacrificial sword art had been passed down in the 9 regions, but it was an extremely mysterious thing to most people. In the eyes of the public, sacrificing blood to the sword was a demonic method. However, the sacrificial sword art was the most important part of the orthodox ancient sword forging art. Sacrificing blood to the sword was a sacrifice to the gods of the heavens. The higher the grade of the blood sacrificed to the sword, the better the effect. The more noble the blood, the better the effect of the sacrifice. However, how could the noble blood be compared to the ancient war dragon? A drop of Chu Fengmian's blood essence was equivalent to a drop of the ancient war dragon's blood essence. After refining the scarlet flame sword, the edge of the scarlet flame sword became much sharper. Chu Fengmian picked up the scarlet flame sword and waved it. The flame within the sword turned into a golden dragon flame. Although the grade of the scarlet flame sword has been fixed and cannot be reforged, with the 9 power lines and the dragon flame of the sacrificial sword, the power of the scarlet flame sword is not inferior to many top-grade Earth-level spiritual weapons. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed. It was his first time refining a weapon, and it was at such a level. Fortunately, the scarlet flame sword was made of good materials, so it could withstand the refining. Otherwise, if it was the scarlet flame sword in Chu Fengmian's hand, the scarlet flame sword might have been burned down immediately. The power of the sacrificial sword art depended on whether the spiritual weapon could withstand it or not. Finally, I have a heavy sword. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed when he saw the scarlet flame sword. As the former number 1 swordsman, he also had an understanding of the heavy sword. Compared to the light sword technique, he preferred the overbearing heavy sword. The heavy sword Tao was the Tao of a tyrant. It was so powerful that it made people submit to it. Let's go. It's time to return to the academy. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed. He understood that it was time to go back. His figure moved, passing through the desert and flying towards the direction of the military camp. The army of the Pingsha king had now eliminated the sand bandits and won a great victory. Without Mu Yuanhua's support, the sand bandits were just a mob. How could they be a match for a real army? When Chu Fengmian returned to the barracks, he saw the soldiers holding the heads of the sand bandits one by one and counting their battle merit. The military exploits of the victorious martial country were determined by the number of people killed. These sand bandits had committed countless crimes. Hence, the current monarch of the victorious martial country gave the order to kill all the sand bandits on the spot. The heads could be used to collect medicinal pills. That was why these soldiers came back with heads. Chu Fengmian saw that a few of the stronger soldiers had more than a dozen heads under their hands. Chu Fengmian passed through the crowd and entered the tent of the Pingsha king. "Who is it?" As soon as Chu Fengmian appeared, many martial warriors shouted. When they saw Fengmian's appearance clearly, all of their faces were filled with joy. "Young Master Chu! Young Master Chu is back!" The middle-aged men all shouted happily. They watched as Chu Fengmian chased after Mu Yuanhua but didn't return for a long time. Each and every one of them was extremely worried in their hearts. Now that Chu Fengmian had returned, their faces were filled with excitement. "Young Master Chu, you're finally back. If you didn't come, this king wouldn't know how to explain it to the victorious martial academy." The Pingsha king also laughed. Seeing Chu Fengmian return, his face was filled with joy. "How's that demon?" Bang! Chu Fengmian didn't say much. He opened a storage pouch and released Mu Yuanhua's body. Although this body was riddled with holes, Mu Yuanhua's unique appearance could still be seen at a glance. As expected, it's that demon. He's finally dead. The Northwest Barren Lands can finally be at peace. The Pingsha king couldn't help but laugh when he saw Mu Yuanhua's corpse. Mu Yuanhua had always been a great scourge of the Northwest Barren Lands. Now that he was finally dead, the problem of the sand bandits could finally be solved. Young Master Chu is indeed brave. This king will remember this favor. If young Master Chu needs this king's help in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. It's my duty. Your Highness, you don't have to do this. Hearing the Pingsha king's words, Chu Fengmian understood that the Pingsha king was trying to rope him in. He didn't bat an eyelid and ignored it. He, Chu Fengmian, had lived a free and unfettered life. He had never been controlled by others. Naturally, he wouldn't be roped in by others. If there's nothing else, this Chu will return to the academy first. There's not much time left. This Chu must return to the academy to give an account. Chu Fengmian opened his mouth and directly walked out. He rode on the black-scaled horse king and left. This Chu Fengmian is truly a genius. I'm afraid that he might be comparable to Ji Lingtian. However, such a genius is extremely difficult to rope in. The Pingsha king muttered to himself. Originally, he was somewhat disdainful of the rumors about Chu Fengmian. He thought that there was no one in Wuxing country who could be compared to Ji Lingtian. However, looking at it now, Chu Fengmian was even more monstrous than the rumors. He was even more monstrous than Ji Lingtian. Unfortunately, his intention to rope Chu Fengmian in was seen through. After Chu Fengmian left, he understood Chu Fengmian's attitude. Dragons do not coexist with snakes. With Chu Fengmian's character, it was impossible for him to join any forces. The black-scaled horse king galloped all the way. 3 days later, Chu Fengmian returned to the academy. This time, Chu Fengmian only used a week's time. It was much faster than the 1 month that Xian Bei Saint had set for him. The mission hall was the place in Wuxing Academy that was responsible for accepting and completing missions. Although Chu Fengmian's mission was accepted by Xian Bei Saint, if Chu Fengmian wanted to receive the reward, he had to complete the mission in the mission hall. The mission hall could be said to be the most bustling place in Wuxing Academy. Countless disciples walked through it to receive missions. The most direct and simple way to earn contribution points was to complete missions. For inner disciples, there might be other methods, but for outer disciples, it was almost the only method. That person, who is he? What an unfamiliar inner disciple. Is he a newcomer in this year's batch? When some outer disciples saw Chu Fengmian, their eyes were filled with shock. They all looked over at him. Among the outer court disciples, almost all of the inner court disciples were considered to be high and mighty figures. It was extremely difficult for 3 inner disciples in Wuxing Academy to be promoted in a year. Therefore, most of the inner disciples knew about them. Chapter 143. Are all of you immersing yourselves in cultivation? How come you don't even know him? Some of the outer sect disciples who recognized Chu Fengmian grumbled to the outer sect disciples beside them. If one didn't know Chu Fengmian in Wuxing Academy, they would be ignorant. He's this year's newcomer king. How come you don't recognize him? This year's newcomer king? Could it be Chu Fengmian? Hearing the outer disciples' words, many people finally realized who Chu Fengmian was. In the past, the newcomer king of Wuxing Academy wasn't very famous. No matter how strong a newcomer was, they could only start from the bottom when they entered the inner sect. However, this year's newcomer king was completely different. He broke the 3 records of Lingtian, reached the 70th level of Tongtian path, and was accepted as a disciple by Saint Xian Bei. Any one of these 3 points was enough for Chu Fengmian to stand proudly in Wuxing Academy. Mission Hall. Chu Fengmian actually came to the mission hall. What mission did he take? I don't think I've seen him in the mission hall. Looking at Chu Fengmian, many martial artists were curious. As the most eye-catching newcomer in Wuxing Academy, his every move was being watched by countless disciples. Chu Fengmian walked into the mission hall. With a glance, he saw numerous jade talismans on one of the walls. Every jade talisman represented a mission. Different stars were engraved on the jade talismans, representing the difficulty of the mission. Under the jade talismans, there were countless jade slips. The missions of Wuxing Academy didn't limit the number of people who could take them, but only one person could complete them. As for the others, it was very likely that they would be very busy. However, this was the rule of Wuxing Academy. Survival of the fittest. Only the strong could survive in Wuxing Academy. A 3-star intermediate mission. Chu Fengmian actually completed a 3-star intermediate mission. Seeing Chu Fengmian take one of the jade talismans, many people around were surprised. A 3-star intermediate mission meant that only martial artists above the 4th level of the Divine Sea Realm could complete it. Chu Fengmian's current 7th level of the Body Refining Realm was enough to complete a 3-star intermediate mission. It's a mission from the Sand Bandits of the Northwest Desert. What? It's actually a mission from a traitor of the Candle Flame clan. Out of curiosity, some of the disciples leaned over to take a look at the jade slip below and exclaimed in shock. I heard that even Senior Brother Feng, one of the top 10 inner disciples, failed to complete this mission. Chu Fengmian actually completed this mission? Mu Yuanhua's matter had spread like wildfire in the Academy of Wuxing. This mission was something that no one was willing to take on. Mu Yuanhua's strength was already extremely powerful. In addition to his demonic skills, he had a cautious personality. In the past, the top 10 inner disciples had gone to search for a single person, but all of them had returned empty-handed. Therefore, even if this mission had a lot of contribution points, most people wouldn't consider it. Who would have thought that it would actually be completed today? I'm here to submit this mission. Chu Fengmian walked to a counter and spoke to one of the mission hall elders. In the mission hall, the outer sect elders were the ones who carried out all the tasks, not the disciples. This was also to ensure the fairness of the mission hall. Oh? What mission? The mission hall elder had a head of white hair and looked extremely old. His strength was around the 2nd level of the Divine Sea Realm. His aptitude wasn't high, so he could only get the position of an outer sect elder. However, he was still an outer sect elder after all. He looked down on the disciples. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, he only said a few words in a low voice. "Give me the jade slip." Chu Fengmian moved his hand and threw the jade slip over. The mission hall elder took the jade slip and injected some spiritual energy into it. Suddenly, his expression changed. "You completed this mission?" The mission hall elder's voice was almost a shout. Immediately, many disciples in the mission hall were attracted. "What kind of mission is it? Why is the mission hall elder so surprised?" Some warriors gathered around. When they saw the jade slip that Chu Fengmian handed over, their expressions weren't any better than the mission hall elders. "Of course." Chu Fengmian softly nodded. Then, he took out a storage pouch and took it out. Mu Yuanhua's body suddenly appeared in the mission hall. "It's actually that traitor. This fellow actually has scales all over his body. He must have really turned into a demon. How could such a demon be killed by him today?" Everyone looked at Chu Fengmian. Most of them had disbelief in their eyes. When Mu Yuanhua betrayed the Candle Flame sect, his strength was already at the 3rd level of the Divine Sea realm. Now that he was possessed, his strength was even stronger than before. Chu Fengmian's cultivation was only at the 7th level of the body refining realm. How could he possibly defeat Mu Yuanhua? Could it be that this kid hit the jackpot and happened to encounter the traitor who was heavily injured, so he killed him? How is that possible? That traitor is extremely cunning. Even Senior Brother Feng couldn't find him after searching for a month. How could he be heavily injured? Could it be that someone helped this kid and allowed him to complete this mission? It's possible. You have to think about this kid's master, you mean? The Xianbei Saint? Could it be that the Xianbei Saint helped this kid to complete this mission? That's impossible. But it's possible that the Xianbei Saint saw that the demon was doing all kinds of evil, so he killed the demon and the kid obtained the corpse to exchange for contribution points. Everyone was discussing, but no one believed that Mu Yuanhua was really killed by Chu Fengmian. Mu Yuanhua, who even the top 10 inner disciples of the Martial Victory Academy couldn't kill, was killed by Chu Fengmian. No one dared to believe this, and they were madly guessing the reason behind it. Hearing these discussions, Chu Fengmian's expression was only cold. Naturally, Chu Fengmian didn't care about these rumors. What he needed now was to complete this mission. "It's really Mu Yuanhua's body." The mission hall elder looked at Mu Yuanhua's body and said softly. Those words already proved one thing. That was, Mu Yuanhua had indeed died. The mission had indeed been completed. Since the elder has confirmed it, then give me the reward for this mission. Chu Fengmian didn't waste any more words. He took out his identity badge and handed it over to the mission hall elder. Wait. The mission hall elder suddenly raised his head. His eyes flickered and a sly smile appeared on his face. Chapter 144. What spiritual weapon? Hearing the elder's words, Chu Fengmian frowned and asked. When he accepted this mission, there was no mention of any spiritual weapon. In the jade slip, there was no mention of any spiritual weapon. It only said to bring back Mu Yuanhua's body. Don't play dumb. I'm talking about the spiritual weapon on Mu Yuanhua's body. The mission hall elder looked at Chu Fengmian and sneered. This demon betrayed the Candle Flame sect for a spiritual weapon. Without that spiritual weapon, you won't be considered to have completed this mission. At most, you'll be given half of the contribution points. What? Hearing the elder's words, Chu Fengmian's eyes suddenly turned cold. Only half of the contribution points? This elder was obviously looking for trouble. The mission had not mentioned anything about spirit weapons. Hence, the mission hall elder was just trying to find fault with them. There's no mention of this in the mission. Chu Fengmian frowned and said. This elder was looking for trouble for no reason, which confused him. After all, this elder was also an outer sect elder. Chu Fengmian didn't want to have a conflict with him for no reason. Is that so? That was a moment of carelessness on this old man's part. Now, this old man will add another one. The elder looked at Chu Fengmian with a faint smile. Half of the reward is 1,000 contribution points. Are you going to hand in this mission? No. Chu Fengmian said coldly. 1,000 contribution points was nothing to Chu Fengmian. Now that Chu Fengmian had the wealth of 1,000,000 energy-gathering pills, he didn't really need contribution points. However, Chu Fengmian couldn't take this loss. If he did, he would be targeted everywhere in the Wusheng Academy. Chu Fengmian knew that kind people would be bullied. Today, Chu Fengmian had to get 2,000 contribution points, no less. Elder, don't go too far, Chu Fengmian said with a cold tone. Chu Fengmian didn't want to make a move, but if this elder was too overbearing, Chu Fengmian didn't mind. In Chu Fengmian's opinion, defeating a martial artist in the second tier of the Divine Sea Realm was as easy as crushing an ant. Too much? I'm an elder of the mission hall. I can directly change most of the missions here. You're still not satisfied with 1,000 contribution points? The elder from the mission hall mocked. Since that's the case, you can keep this mission for 3 to 5 years. Maybe I'll be in a good mood and give you a few hundred more contribution points. However, you have to understand that you can only accept one mission at a time. If you don't hand it in, you can forget about accepting another mission for the next 3 to 5 years. The words of the mission hall elder were extremely sinister. Carrying out missions was one of the fastest ways to earn contribution points. Even some of the inner sect experts would take on missions. Naturally, Chu Fengmian would do so when he needed contribution points. If he didn't allow Chu Fengmian to accept missions for 3 to 5 years, it would definitely be a painful blow to Chu Fengmian. He was forcing Chu Fengmian to lower his head today. How dare you come to the mission hall after offending Family Chu? It seems that this kid is going to be taught a lesson today. Doesn't he know that the mission hall is Family Chu's territory? This kid has been arrogant since he came to the academy. First, he offended Family Chu, the Qing family, the Crown Prince, and the law enforcement team. However, he doesn't understand how much influence these forces have in the Martial Victory Academy. His days of suffering are still to come. This is just a prelude. Some of the onlookers were not surprised by the mission hall elder's words. Instead, they sneered. Many of them even spoke in a mocking tone. Family Chu? Chu Fengmian suddenly understood when he heard the discussion. This mission hall elder was indeed looking for trouble. The mission hall was a place that was managed by Family Chu. This mission hall elder was also an elder who was on good terms with Family Chu. Chu Fengmian had once defeated Chu Beige during the ARC assessment, causing Chu Beige to be unable to take the assessment. Chu Fengmian had already formed a grudge with Family Chu. Now, this mission hall elder wanted to make things difficult for Chu Fengmian in order to curry favor with Family Chu. Since there was already a grudge between them, Chu Fengmian did not have to worry about anything. Elder, are you sure you want to make things difficult for me? Chu Fengmian frowned. Coldness flashed in his eyes. The spiritual power in his body had already begun to circulate. A powerful pressure rushed toward the mission hall elder. This was the last chance he would give the mission hall elder. Make things difficult? Ha ha, so what if this old man wants to make things difficult for you? You're just an inner sect disciple. What can you do? The mission hall elder laughed. This old man knows that your strength is amazing. However, this is the mission hall. According to the sect rules, anyone who dares to make a move in the mission hall will be imprisoned for 10 years. If you dare to make a move, you can spend the next 10 years in the Blackwater region. This old man is right here. Let's see if you dare to hit me. The mission hall elder laughed arrogantly when he saw the spiritual power erupting from Chu Fengmian's body. Slap. His laughter did not last long as a crisp sound could be heard all of a sudden. A clear slap mark could be seen on the mission hall elder's face. So what if I hit you? Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a hint of mockery. It was as if he was laughing at the mission hall elder's stupidity. So what if he did beat him up today? Chu Fengmian had never cared about the sect rules of Wuxing Academy. Ever since the Crown Prince dared to make a move on him during the exam, Chu Fengmian no longer believed in the sect rules. The sect rules of Wuxing Academy were only effective against powerless trash. Take the Crown Prince for example. He had never cared about the sect rules. He had attacked Chu Fengmian and forced the hall master to retreat. He had not received any punishment. Today, Chu Fengmian would not care about the so-called sect rules of Wuxing Academy. You dare to hit me? The mission hall elder looked at Chu Fengmian and said in a daze. This slap had definitely made him a little dumbfounded. As the mission hall elder, he had always made things difficult for others. No one dared to take revenge because of his identity as the mission hall elder. No one dared to make a move on him. However, Chu Fengmian showed no mercy today. He had slapped him. What? One slap is not enough? Chu Fengmian's mouth moved. Slap! He raised his hand once again and slapped the mission hall elder's face. Chapter 145. He really slapped him. How lawless! Chu Fengmian is really lawless. Are the rules of the academy not intimidating him at all? Well done! Some of the disciples who had been detained by the mission hall elder couldn't help but shout in satisfaction. The mission hall elder had used his status to bully the disciples who had bad relationships with their family Chu. However, due to his status, no one dared to do anything to him. Chu Fengmian's actions had definitely fulfilled their wishes. Countless people originally thought that Chu Fengmian would definitely choose to endure this time, but the result was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone understood that the person in front of them wasn't a disciple of the Martial Victory Academy. Other disciples of the Martial Victory Academy wouldn't dare to go against the mission hall elder. After all, how could a disciple go against an elder? However, Chu Fengmian was different. Chu Fengmian would never allow anyone to bully him. Chu Fengmian had even dared to stab Lingtian with his sword. Chu Fengmian had hit the mission hall elder without any nonsense. Do you still want me to continue? Chu Fengmian's eyes were fixed on the mission hall elder as he said coldly. Transfer 2,000 contribution points to me. Chu Fengmian, you're really courting death. The two slaps came before the mission hall elder could react. Ever since he became the mission hall elder, he had never been slapped before. Even the top 10 inner disciples had always been respectful to him, but Chu Fengmian dared to slap him. Chu Fengmian slapped his face in front of everyone. Just you wait. You'll definitely be imprisoned in the Black Water region. You'll be sent to the endless sea of demonic beasts. The mission hall elder shouted angrily. I don't know if I'll be imprisoned in the Black Water region, but if you don't give me a satisfactory explanation today, don't think you'll have an easy time this time. Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. The mission hall elder was about to die, but he still dared to threaten him. What Chu Fengmian hated the most was being threatened by others. This mission hall elder had repeatedly provoked Chu Fengmian's bad luck. Come here. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and a burst of spiritual energy suddenly erupted, grabbing at the mission hall elder. Overlapping feet fist. When the mission hall elder saw Chu Fengmian's attack, he also threw out a punch, preparing to block it. However, his strength was not on the same level as Chu Fengmian's. Mu Yuanhua, who was in the 4th tier of the Spirit Sea realm, was easily killed by Chu Fengmian. This elder of the mission palace was nothing. Get over here! Chu Fengmian roared and waved his hand again. The mission hall elder's punch was easily broken by Chu Fengmian. His body was sucked into Chu Fengmian's hand by Chu Fengmian's spiritual power. He was pulled in front of Chu Fengmian without any resistance. Chu Fengmian, what are you doing? The mission hall elder was already filled with regret. Why did he provoke Chu Fengmian for no reason? Chu Fengmian even dared to offend the Qing family, Family Chu, and the Crown Prince. He was just an insignificant mission hall elder. How could Chu Fengmian be afraid of him? However, it was impossible for him to open his mouth and beg for mercy now. He had been beaten up so miserably by Chu Fengmian in front of so many people. If he begged for mercy now, he would never be able to raise his head again in the Martial Victory Academy. Kneel on the ground and beg for mercy now. I can still give you a chance. Chu Fengmian's stern voice suddenly sounded. What? The mission hall elder's mind went blank. He thought that no matter how excessive Chu Fengmian was, there would be a limit and he would ask for peace. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Chu Fengmian never showed mercy to his opponents. In the Academy of Wuxing, Chu Fengmian had no way to kill the mission hall elder. However, Chu Fengmian had 10,000 ways to humiliate him. I said, kneel. Every word of Chu Fengmian's contained a huge amount of spiritual power. The moment he said it, it was filled with supreme majesty. Dragon's aura, the real dragon's aura. Under the dragon's might, the mission hall elder didn't even have the will to resist. His knees went soft and he knelt directly in front of Chu Fengmian. It was a great humiliation. As an outer sect elder, he had a distinguished status. Countless disciples would greet and salute him when they saw him. However, he was defeated by a newcomer. In the hands of a newcomer, he didn't even have the ability to resist and was defeated. He was forced to kneel on the ground in front of everyone. This kind of humiliation made him spit out a mouthful of blood. He was almost angered to death. What? The mission hall elder really knelt under Chu Fengmian's words. Is he crazy? Does Chu Fengmian have demonic power? How can it be? The onlookers couldn't understand. Chu Fengmian didn't even make a move. His words alone were enough to make the mission hall elder kneel on the ground. This mission hall elder, not to mention that he was just an outer sect elder of the Academy of Wuxing, even with his strength, a warrior in the second tier of the Divine Sea Realm, he could be considered a powerhouse. In the entire Wuxing nation, he could be considered a powerhouse. However, he knelt on the ground because of one sentence. The onlookers didn't understand. The only one who really understood was the mission hall elder. Dragon might. The moment the real dragon might pressed on him, the mission hall elder's mind went blank. When he came back to his senses, he was already kneeling on the ground. When he tried to get up, the pressure from his body made him unable to even get up. Since you are willing to kneel, there is no need to hurry. Chu Fengmian's face revealed a smile. This smile, in the eyes of the mission hall elder, was an extremely chilling smile. Little bastard, just you wait. You will regret this. This is the Academy of Wuxing. It is not a place where you can cover the sky with one hand. The mission hall elder roared. This was the Academy of Wuxing. Everything that happened in the mission hall would spread quickly. He believed that when Family Chu's people arrived, it would be the end of Chu Fengmian. I know that you are waiting for Family Chu's people to come and save you. Chu Fengmian looked at the mission hall elder with a provocative smile. However, even if Family Chu's people dare to come and save you, I will make them kneel one by one. I will accompany you. Arrogant Junior, I am Chu Qianjue. Let's see how you can make me kneel. An angry roar suddenly came from outside the mission hall. Two figures broke through the crowd and suddenly arrived. One of the two figures was a middle-aged man. It was Chu Qianjue who had just spoken. The other figure was extremely young. When Chu Fengmian saw this figure, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Chapter 146. It's Chu Qianjue. He's an outstanding member of the previous generation of the family Chu. He's not even 40 years old, yet he's already an outer court elder. I'm afraid that he'll be promoted to an inner court elder in the future. He'll be a mainstay of the family Chu. Some of the onlookers couldn't help but speak out when they heard Chu Qianjue's name. Chu Qianjue was a true family Chu expert. His strength had already reached the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm. His strength could be considered outstanding among the outer court elders. And now Chu Qianjue was actually here. It seems that Chu Fengmian has finally kicked an iron plate this time. Chu Qianjue is here. He's definitely going to be taught a lesson. I wonder how badly Chu Qianjue will teach him. Chu Qianjue's attacks are extremely ruthless. I'm afraid that brat's going to meet with misfortune today. However, that brat's master is the Xianbei saint. Chu Qianjue won't dare to kill him. Even if he doesn't kill him, he'll still have to teach him a lesson. The onlookers discussed among themselves. Apart from Chu Qianjue, the other young man didn't attract much attention. Only Chu Fengmian took a few more glances at him. Chu Wanga. He was the one who had provoked Chu Fengmian in the arc test, and was defeated by Chu Fengmian. In the end, he didn't even get to board the arc. Now, he had actually appeared in the Wuxing Academy again. Judging by his current attire, he was actually an inner court disciple. Little bastard, you didn't expect this, did you? Even if you tried to stop me, I still came to the Wuxing Academy. Chu Wanga sneered as he looked at Chu Fengmian. Those little tricks of yours are meaningless in front of me. You're just a piece of trash who relies on your family's influence. You're just a defeated opponent. How dare you act so arrogantly? Chu Fengmian glanced at Chu Wanga and spoke with disdain. The reason why Chu Wanga was still in the Wuxing Academy was because of his family Chu's influence in the Wuxing Academy. Chu Fengmian didn't care about a piece of trash who relied on his family's influence. He didn't even have the interest to continue talking with Chu Wanga. You're the one who spoke just now? Chu Fengmian glanced at Chu Qianjue and revealed a sinister smile on his face. Looks like you want to kneel on the ground like that old man? Shameless boasting. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Chu Qianjue snorted coldly. His heart was already filled with murderous intent. Chu Fengmian had humiliated the family Chu in front of so many people. If he didn't kill Chu Fengmian, the anger in his heart wouldn't be quelled. Junior, even if your master comes today, you will still die. Chu Qianjue shouted angrily. His voice was filled with killing intent. Master? I alone am enough to deal with all of you. Chu Fengmian smiled disdainfully. 5th LV of the Spirit Sea Realm. His strength was even inferior to Feng Huoye, who had consumed the explosive blood pill. Feng Huoye had been casually toyed with by Chu Fengmian. Chu Qianjue was the same. Hurry up and come. I'll give you a chance to attack first. Otherwise, you won't even have a chance to attack. Chu Fengmian's tone was relaxed. When he spoke, it was as if he was talking to an ant. Both of his hands were behind his back, and his attitude was completely relaxed. Arrogance. The only thing that people could think of from Chu Fengmian was incomparable arrogance. If Chu Qianjue hadn't chosen to become an elder, he would be at least one of the top 10 inner disciples by now. How could Chu Fengmian let such a person attack first? This wasn't arrogance anymore. This was a madman. Only a madman would do something like this. Good, very good. It's been a long time since someone dared to challenge the family Chu's dignity like this. Little bastard, today, I will use your blood to wash away the dignity of the family Chu. Chu Qianjue's body trembled as he stood up. His face was flushed red. He was an expert at the 5th level of the Spirit Sea Realm, an outer sect elder. How could he be looked down upon by Chu Fengmian, a junior at the 7th level of the body refinement realm? Chu Qianjue had wanted to crush Chu Fengmian to death countless times. Second uncle, let me do it this time. Suddenly, Chu Wanga said from the side. I will kill this kid with my own hands. Hearing Chu Wanga's voice, Chu Qianjue's anger gradually dissipated. He looked at Chu Wanga and nodded. All right, I'll leave this kid's life to you. Hurry up and attack. Don't push each other around. You'll have to kneel there anyway. There's no difference. Chu Fengmian smiled disdainfully. In Chu Fengmian's eyes, the strength of these two people was like ant. It didn't matter who went first. The result would be the same. They would all kneel on the ground like the Mission Palace elder. Little bastard, today, I will kill you like killing a dog. Chu Wanga looked at Chu Fengmian. His anger could no longer be contained. Spiritual energy burst out from his body, and he suddenly turned into a purple light shadow. He rushed toward Chu Fengmian and threw a punch. Under this punch, an earthy yellow color actually appeared. Innate earth spirit. This Chu Wanga had broken through to the spirit sea realm. Little bastard, no matter how strong your body is, so what? Now that I've reached the spirit sea realm, it's easy for me to kill you. Chu Wanga laughed loudly. His defeat by Chu Fengmian aroused his fighting spirit. With the help of the family Chu's resources, he stepped into the spirit sea realm in just a few days. He became the first warrior to step into the spirit sea realm among the 4 geniuses. What a powerful punch! Spirit sea realm. This family Chu's Jr. is so terrifying. It seems that the battle between him and Chu Fengmian will determine who is the real newcomer king this year. Seeing Chu Wanga's strength, many people began to notice his existence. A spirit sea realm warrior, and such a young one at that. With such talent, he might not be weaker than Chu Fengmian. Although Chu Fengmian's strength was strong, his realm was not high. If his realm was not high, no matter how strong his skills and strength were, in the end, he would not be able to fight against a real powerhouse. Realm was the most important point for a martial artist. Now that Chu Wanga had stepped into the spirit sea realm, in the eyes of the public, he was the one who had the real hope to compete with Chu Fengmian for the title of newcomer king. This battle was the battle for the title of newcomer king. I thought you had something to rely on. You're so confident just by stepping into the spirit sea realm? Chu Fengmian said with a disdainful smile. Chapter 147. Cut the bullsh *T. Let's see if you can take a punch from this young master today. Chu Bei-gu laughed maniacally. He had made ample preparations to deal with Chu Fengmian. Kangba fist. Chu Bei-gu threw out a punch. The punch was filled with the aura of a supreme overlord. It's the family Chu's martial technique. Kangba fist, an upper profound martial technique. Even some of the experts in the family Chu are not qualified to learn this martial technique. How could a junior use it? The moment the punch was thrown out, Chu Fengmian felt a wave of pressure, as if it was trying to immobilize his body. This was the true overlord's punch. The pressure alone was enough to render an ordinary martial artist unable to resist. However, in front of Chu Fengmian, the pressure was like a child's play. The overlord was only the king of humans. It was nothing in front of the true ancient war dragon. Fight. The ancient war dragon's blood essence boiled in Chu Fengmian's body. Waves of energy surged up. Break. Chu Fengmian threw out a punch. You're courting death. Seeing Chu Fengmian's punch, Chu Bei-gu laughed. He had guessed that with Chu Fengmian's character, he would never retreat. He would face him head-on. With his current realm, he could only use the Kangba fist once. If Chu Fengmian dodged it, his plan would fail. However, Chu Bei-gu believed that with Chu Fengmian's arrogant character, he would never dodge. Chu Fengmian did as he had expected. He did not dodge but took the punch head-on. Chu Fengmian is too arrogant. Not to mention martial artists of the same realm, even martial artists of a few levels higher would not dare to take the Kangba fist head-on. It seems like Chu Bei-gu has won this battle. Chu Fengmian will never be able to take the punch. Many of the people present shook their heads. With this punch, the winner had been decided. Chu Bei-gu could not be defeated by this punch that was invincible in the same realm. Even Chu Qianjue, who was standing at the side, smiled. As long as Chu Fengmian dared to resist the blue tyrant fist, only death awaited him. There was no other outcome. Murderous intent appeared in Chu Fengmian's eyes. His feet moved as he charged forward. What does this kid want to do? Does he still think that he has the ability to fight back? Seeing Chu Fengmian's action, everyone present was shocked. In the face of such a terrifying punch, any cultivator would only think of escaping or how to resist. But now, seeing Chu Fengmian's actions, he actually wanted to counterattack Chu Banj. Could it be that Chu Fengmian was really confident that he could withstand this punch? Impossible. Countless onlookers shook their heads. There was no way he could withstand this punch. If the blue tyrant fist, which was invincible in the same realm, was used against a martial artist of a lower realm, once it hit, victory would be assured. What azure tyrant fist? It's just a small profound grade martial skill. Invincible and undefeated? Chu Fengmian's mocking voice rang out. It's time for you to see what a true overlord is, what true invincibility is. Dragon fights in the wild. Chu Fengmian's figure moved. His punch was aimed at Chu Banj. The moment the punch was thrown, everyone heard a loud and clear roar. Roar. Dragon's roar. Chu Fengmian's punch actually carried a dragon's roar. So what if it's a dragon's roar? The blue tyrant fist is invincible. It's family Chu's invincible fist. Chu Banj was shocked when he heard the dragon's roar, but the next moment, he laughed out loud. He believed that his family Chu's martial skill was absolutely invincible. But in the next second, his face was completely frozen. His fist wind was almost instantly shattered by Chu Fengmian's punch. At the same time, the remaining spiritual power was almost simultaneously thrown at Chu Banj. Chu Banj's figure was suddenly sent flying a few meters away. Then, the remaining power was actually all pressed on his body. Bang! The sound of someone kneeling on the ground rang out. Chu Banj's figure actually knelt on the ground, right next to the mission hall elder. This kind of control of spiritual power was really frightening to the extreme. The crowd was speechless. They thought that Chu Banj could still challenge Chu Fengmian, but this was the result. The strength of the two sides was not even on the same level. A body-refining realm martial artist was actually toying with a divine sea realm martial artist in the palm of his hand. This scene was so similar to the scene in the Northwest Desert. It was as if Chu Fengmian was the real divine sea realm martial artist, and Chu Banj was the body-refining realm martial artist. Damn it! Chu Qianjue's figure moved almost as soon as he saw Chu Banj kneel down. He clenched his right hand into a fist and almost instantly appeared behind Chu Fengmian, quietly throwing a punch at him. Die, Junior! Chu Qianjue was now in a rage. He would rather launch a sneak attack. Today, he had to kill Chu Fengmian. Otherwise, his family Chu would lose all face. Sneak attack? It seems that you also can't wait to see the two of them kneel down? The moment Chu Qianjue appeared behind Chu Fengmian's faint voice sounded. His punch landed on Chu Fengmian's body, but it only broke a shadow. Chu Fengmian's figure stood to the side and directly grabbed Chu Qianjue. Supreme Dragon's Might, kneel down. Chu Fengmian waved his hand. Without any hesitation, a surge of spiritual power burst out. Chu Qianjue felt as if his body weighed 1,000 kilograms. He was simply unable to move. His knees involuntarily bent. Even if he was 10,000 times unwilling, his body was simply unable to withstand Chu Fengmian's power. Little bastard! I am a member of the family Chu. My status is incomparably noble. If you dare to make me kneel, I would rather die than submit. Chu Qianjue roared angrily. Our family Chu will absolutely not let you off. Even your master, the Xianbei Saint, will not be able to protect you. Noble status? What nonsense are you spouting? Kneel down. Chu Fengmian raised his eyebrows. His spiritual power increased by a bit. The sound of Chu Qianjue's ribs breaking could be heard continuously. Under the enormous pressure, Chu Qianjue's ribs were on the verge of breaking. However, Chu Qianjue's body was still standing. He could not kneel. He was a genius of the family Chu. He was currently the cornerstone of the family Chu. In the future, he might be promoted to become an inner court elder. To have him kneel to a new inner court disciple was a humiliation that was much more painful than death. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.